Sword of Coming Chapter 1023. In a rural school there is a teacher named Qin Ji, who is instructing his disciples on a certain pile frame. When Zhao Xuxia rested, he was in a complicated mood because during the day, Master was almost scratched by a shrew who broke into the school. There is no curfew in the capital of Xuanhuan. Wu Di, a Taoist priest who sets up a stall for fortune-telling, had a late-night snack in the kitchen and walked out of the house in the dark. During this period he passed by the Yashan of Changning County. The Yashan temple was brightly lit. Dispute. The Taoist priest went north and walked in a shabby alley in Yongjia County, intending to find a young man and chat a few words. On the other side of Tsayu Mountain, the old-fashioned acquaintance of the Zhuji school, who came to the riverside to make a nest and prepare for night fishing. This is the case with the masters who only need one pole, one bench and one fish basket, and absolutely do not set up a street stall. In the Fanwan mansion in the Hehuan Mountains, the young man with straw sandals carrying a sword and the pseudonym Chen Ren, with an empty scabbard, was hesitant to let his disciples play against the unrighteous-looking master when to practice his skills. On the top of Pomo Peak, Qin Pingan, dressed in immortal style and Taoist attire, was non-committal when he heard the words. He smiled and said goodbye to Chao Rong. Be sure to sweep the bed and wait. Chao Rong also didn't say that he would definitely be a guest at Luopao Mountain, but just smiled and said blessed and immeasurable Tianzuan. Qin Pingan's figure turned into a rainbow and it was fleeting. He left the top of Splashing Mo Peak, and left Hehuan Mountain in a few blinks of an eye. Lu Qin squatted on the ground again, picked up 9 small stones and held them in his palms, shook them gently like throwing dice and threw them on the ground. Although Chao Rong claimed to be dull in his aptitude and had been practicing Taoism for 3,000 years, he had never been able to find a way for Xiaju to ascend. Just talking about the talisman formation method, Chao Rong has a great insight. Hearing is false, seeing is believing. This famous young hidden official has already entered the hall with Fu Lu, and his attainments are definitely not low. As for how high it is, Chao Rong is not interested in exploring. He and Qin Pingan are neither relatives nor related, and there is no grievance or enmity. Chao Rong, thank you for holding back and not calculating Qin Pingan's numerology without authorization, otherwise you will be a brother or a brother with Lu Shen. Lu Qin made a joke first and then explained, the Big Dipper plus the 2 assistant chiefs, Qin Pingan created 9 avatars with the talisman technique. Just now this Qin Pingan as one of the left assistant and the right by, can't stay here for too long. Otherwise the whole body will be moved with one hair, and the whole formation will be messed up. Chao Rong asked curiously, Master and Qin Pingan have a good relationship. As for Qin Pingan's method of forming a talisman clone, it is not enough to make a Taoist heavenly monarch make a fuss. It's pitiful to say Master Lu Qin visited Howren World several times, but he never took the initiative to find Chao Rong, the direct disciple of Lingfei Guan. Regarding the rumors about the master and the young hidden official, Chao Rong has naturally heard a lot of gossip on the top of the mountain in Yizhou over the years, not to mention that he traveled to Beiju Luzhou before, met his junior sister He Xiaoyang, and heard some insider. Lu Qin had a sad face, nodded and said, it's good, it's entangled and it's a mess. Putting his hands together and breathing lightly, Lu Qin looked up at Hehuan Mountain again and asked, how is He Xiaoyang? Some things. Lu Qin is too lazy to deduce the calculation. He is a Taoist priest, and he is not an old hen who spreads his wings to protect a group of chickens. Chao Rong replied respectfully, reporting to Master, Bai Chang secretly retreated not long ago, and junior sister he knew that it might be a trap to target her, but she still insisted on blocking her, so the disciple and senior brother Gu had to gamble with her. There is also Tianjun Xieshur in the dark to help fight the battle, but because of his identity, it is not suitable for him to take action against Bai Chang. He can only fight from a distance to prevent Bai Chang from killing junior sister He. Gu Qingsong, whose name is Xianxia, was not a serious disciple of Lu Qin, but was just a boat-punting boatman who followed Lu Qin to visit Xian. It's just that these heirs of Chao Rong all recognize this big brother who has never lost a quarrel and won't be discouraged by anyone who sees him. Tianjun Xieshur is the nominal bearer on Luzhou Mountain in Beiju. Except for the Confucian Academy, he can control the heavens and the earth. This Taoist Tianjun, whose ancestral home is in Tiantoi Lane in Lizhu Cave, is similar to that of Qi Zhen, the of the gods, who was in Aquarius in the early years. As for Datafeng Fire Dragon Master, he will never admit his identity as a black and white person, always saying that the poor road has little money in his pocket, so he can't speak harshly. Thinking of the encounter with the mantis catching the cicada and the oriole behind, Chao Rong inevitably felt a little lingering in his heart, so he quietly clenched his fists, diluting the image of the sword Xiu Baishang in his heart. Beisheng's retreat is true, It is absolutely true. It is the speed of breaking through the border and exiting the border is staggeringly fast, which is unheard of. And it doesn't look like a brand new ascension that needs a stable realm. The previous disciples believed that they had overestimated Jianxian Baishang enough, but they still underestimated. Being caught by surprise, senior brother Gu blocked the first sword with the temporary formation, and he was not lightly injured. Now he is recovering on Osmanthus Island. The disciple blocked the second sword, and junior sister he barely caught the first sword. 3 swords were only smashed into the air by 1 sword, and his body smashed into a mountain. Fortunately he was not seriously injured. Before Xiesher could help, a Taoist priest who claimed to be Chunyang came. Chao Rong's words couldn't be more succinct. Others seemed to be very calm, but I believe that all the authorities involved, including Xiesher who did not take action, would not feel any relief. Well, maybe except for that senior brother Gu who is used to seeing big scenes. It's just that Chao Rong has to admit that he Xiaoyang, a junior sister, is really not ordinary. It wasn't that they joined forces to face an Ascension Realm sword cultivator, and they had no chance of winning, but Chao Rong's trip was more of a Taoist protection, and the teacher was unknown, so he had no reason to be ruthless against Bai Chang. They had clearly fallen into the trap carefully arranged by Bai Chang, but junior sister he was only able to escape with a single blow, which was an unimaginable encounter on the mountain for Chao Rong. Lu Chen obviously expected this ending. He smiled and said, "Do you think the name of the number 1 sword immortal in Beiju Luzhou Beidi is a sleight of hand? There is no reason for this." Bai Chang is very patient in order to prove the Tao and soar. He has far-reaching plans openly and secretly. He has at least paved 3 paths for himself, trying to become one, which is very hard. For example, Bai Chang didn't hesitate to cooperate with Xinjiang Dogwood Feng Tianhuan to covet the luck of Aquarius Island's kendo. It almost succeeded. Ambition is lofty, it's just the way of doing things, it's a bit suspicious of unscrupulousness, and it's more like a pure Shanzi Yeshio. Xiaoyang doesn't compare his luck with Bai Chang. What is it like to use one's weaknesses to attack another's strengths? Then Beiju Luzhou is a well-known sword cultivator like the clouds. Logically speaking, there is always a sword cultivator in the Ascension realm. Gu Qingsong can't speak his mind, and he can do anything easily, so don't talk about him. You Chao Rong don't think it strange? Take 10,000 steps back and say that Xiesher, as an elder on the mountain and a snake in the field, doesn't persuade us to sect master he? When Lu Chen said this, he smiled. He Xiaoyang wants to delay Bai Chang's step into the Ascension realm sword cultivator. It is best to hurt his fundamentals so that he will not be able to enter the Ascension realm in this life, otherwise both parties will be Ascension. There is no way to fight, at least for 1800 years in the same continent, the 2 mortal enemies of the great Tao, but only staring. It is embarrassing. Bai Chang wants to let He Xiaoyang go through this battle, drop a level or 2, lose the next big opportunity step by step, and plan to let He Xiaoyang spend his life. It's hard to look back. Anyway, mutual, they are both afraid of each other, and they are all betting on what to do once and for all. One is betting that Beisheng's cultivating qualifications are not so good, and it is impossible to go out of retreat. She always has bad luck. Chao Rong asked. The Taoist Chunyang said that he is an old acquaintance with Master, and he still owes Master a favor. Lu Chen said, "It's not a debt of gratitude. Fellow Taoist Chunyang and Baigu Jinren once traveled together in Qingzhou City, and he and your master are still very close. The Taoist who attains immortal longevity is not allowed to walk as a corpse. As one of Lu Chen's 7 hearts, the bone-real man is undoubtedly the opposite. Taoist, sidewalk Taoist. Long-term vision of the long-lived person. The Taoist age is long enough, and if you live for a long time, you can see a lot of later people, step by step to the top of the mountain." Lu Chen smiled and asked, "Have the 2 of them fought so much that the sky is torn apart and the earth is shaking?" Chao Rong shook his head and said, "Bai Chang and the Taoist Chunyang are in a sight the size of a stone flat on the top of the mountain, and compare their swordsmanship. In the end, it is no exaggeration to say that the top of a mountain is thick like water and then freezes." Chao Rong said with emotion, "A Taoist priest is a sword immortal, purely using swordsmanship against swordsmanship. I never thought that a Taoist priest would win." Lu Chen was even more surprised by this. It would be a strange thing if Bai Chang, who had just entered the Ascension realm, won against Lu Yen, who had attained enlightenment 3,000 years ago. Chunyang Lu Yen can't say that he will definitely be among the top 10 in the world in the future, and Lu Chen doesn't dare to promise anything. But taking a step back, Lu Yen became one of the candidates, so there was no suspense. Lu Chen smiled and said, "The founder of Jingxian Temple, what happened in those days? What a mistake she made to be removed from your name and become an abandoned disciple of Lingfei Temple. Why does she want to restore her status as a genealogy ultimatum? Chao Rong told the truth honestly. She was too anxious to enter the 5 realms. She took a crooked way, secretly retreated, and as a result her Taoist heart fell and she went into the devil. The disciples noticed the signs and had to force her out illusory realm. If you take one step later, she will be taken advantage of by the demons and occupy the magpie's nest. The crime should be death, and her expulsion down the mountain has been regarded as a side effect. Lu Qin said regretfully, I remember when you entered the fairyland, I once walked out of the patriarch's hall to hang the statue. Later, when I was walking in the mountains, I saw her. In the vast world, such as Lingfei Temple and Taiping Mountain, Taoist priests can invite the patriarch of one of the 3 headmasters of Baiyujing when they are among the heavenly monarchs. There is a stick of incense. At that time she was still an ignorant girl with a pointed chin and round eyes. When the girl saw the crown on top of Lu Chen's head, she insisted on investigating him for trespassing. Be smart and guess who and why. If you are a little stupid, I am afraid that I will not let it go, and find an opportunity to inform the elders of the division. In the complicated world, the innocence of man is like an unsheathed sword, which can only be hung on a wall called childhood or youth. Maybe when I return to my hometown occasionally I can look at it a few times, but I can't carry it with me all the time. Lu Qin smiled, Chao Tianjun, you're not honest. Chao Rong looked embarrassed and guessed why the master was making fun of him, so he had to bite the bullet and say, Junior sister, he is worried about being punished by the master, so she asked the disciple to help conceal it. It turned out that before he Xiaoyang set off, she had already made up her mind to give up a cave, plus her fall as a price. She would also stop Bai Chang from breaking through. It was only because Bai Chang went out of the border too quickly that he Xiaoyang's loss-making business, which could be said to be willing to kill 800 and lose 1,000, failed. Lu Qin didn't bother to care about this kind of thing and said, go back and say hello to Xiangjuan, and restore this person's genealogy status at Lingfiguan. Chao Rong bowed his head and said, follow the law. After Qin Pingan left Momo Peak, he went straight back to the place where there is a historic site. The immortal family can follow the traces of the ancients. Following the written records of a local county annals, Qin Pingan really found a deep mountain that the local people regarded as the residence of immortals since ancient times. It is just a temple in the mountain which has long been abandoned, and the incense that is like a city in history is no longer seen. However, Qin Pingan found a few frost pines on the mountain and see supplementary records beside an old road. Qin Pingan looked at the ancient pine trees and considered 2 problems. The realm was not enough, and he couldn't use the supernatural powers of the upper 5 realms. Not to mention the square-inch objects. Even the objects just a short distance away couldn't hold these ancient trees. To say that carrying a pine tree on his shoulders and flying into the sea of clouds would be a bit outrageous after all. Fallen Mountain. Qin Pingan walked out of the first floor of the bamboo building, rubbed his wrist lightly and looked into the distance in the dark night. The stars fell and the plains were wide, and the sky and the earth merged as if only by galloping on a horse he could reach the end of the sky. Because of the encounter with Lu Qin on the Xuanhuan Mountain, a series of related books were found here, such as the 7 political chapters of 5 Elements of Great Justice, Tian Sun, Lu Liji, Ri Jiuling, etc., as well as books from Tong Yi the Higuanzi, and the astronomical array of stars borrowed by Zhuangguoguan have actually been read several times, and they have already been thoroughly familiar with the heart, just reviewing the old and learning the new. Walking along the bluestone path, walking near the old cook's house, I heard Qin Lingjun and Zheng Daifeng's signature laughter from a distance. Qin Pingan used his knees to think about what they were doing. After hesitating for a while, Qin Pingan still crossed the threshold and came to the side room. The doors were not closed at both places. He stood leaning against the door, his hands clasped in his sleeves, and saw the spiritual tools used to watch the mirror and the moon on the table in the house, piled up into mountains. At the moment, it is a landscape painting of a small fairy mansion in Beipingzu. There is a graceful fairy walking slowly. Zheng Dafeng touched his mouth, commented and played the piano. Qin Lingjun saw the woman sitting beside the dressing table and started to pull her hair. The boy and Xingyi laughed and said that when she saw her hair tied, I knew it wasn't easy. Xianwei was actually here. Brother Dafeng and fellow Daoist Jingqing had heard a lot of words before, but now the gatekeeper understands it as soon as he heard it. Therefore Qin Lingjun always praised him for his understanding. Only the old cook was alone, sitting elsewhere, watching a picture of a scholar taking the exam at night in a haunted house. He was holding a vegetable plate and a plate of fried soybeans. The old cook threw a few fried soybeans in his mouth and was seeing outside the boudoir attic. There are 2 white and red clothes circling in the air, but they don't fall to the ground. The old cook got up and wanted to give up his seat, but Qin Pingan didn't disturb their yaxing, waved his hand and left. Going to the mountain road, Xuanhuan was still practicing boxing, and now she looked at the young mountain master's eyes, and finally she was not so thief-proof. In the early years, Qin Pingan got angry when he thought of this. The old cook's room is so ugly, the old and the young, there is no serious person. You don't take precautions, but why do you want to prevent me, a decent gentleman? Walking on the steps, I remembered the authentic book of pills, presented by Li Shixing. It is a thin booklet that records more than 80 kinds of talismans. Back then, when Zhang Jiaolu temporarily borrowed the 14-realm Dao Xing to Qin Pingan, the young hidden officer was not idle, making the best use of everything, while traveling through the mountains and rivers of treasure Pingzhou, taking advantage of the fact that the realm was so high that it couldn't be higher. I was able to condescend, and drew the top-grade talismans located on the pages behind the original Book of Alchemy. The number was extremely considerable, but after that, even when I asked the sword to hold Yueshan, it was never used and more than 300 talismans were used. Qin Pingan was all locked in a small wooden box that was sealed off the mountain, a veritable bottom of the box. Qin Pingan came to the gate of the mountain and sat at the table. Realm can be borrowed, but to draw talismans in person, you still need to consume your own spiritual energy savings. The loss of spiritual energy is the capital of the 300 talismans. After making an estimation according to the market price on the mountain, the cultivator's aura was converted into immortal money. If Qin Pingan chose to sell that box of talismans, he would earn a lot. Just because of the high rank of these talismans, the rank of the Forbidden Mountain went up with the tide. At that time, Qin Pingan felt that since he was already in the Jade Realm, it would not be too difficult to enter the immortal realm, so he dug himself a big hole and ended up leaving. After a trip to the wild world, he fell directly into Nascent Soul, and so far he has not been able to return to Yupu, and he knows his hardships. When a Qi practitioner draws and sacrifices a talisman, it is important to open and close the door. As for Wufu's talismans, the spiritual energy overflows so fast, like a flood bursting a dike out of control. In the end it still doesn't work. But if one day if you really get the door, I believe there will be a unique scene. Yuzhou. Living in the mountains, living with the monastery, the diet is light, with more vegetables and less fat. The tofu that the temple grinds itself is slightly sour, and the vegetarian rice has been lacking for several months, and the taste of meat has not been known for a long time. Cooking and cooking mirrors in the mountains, even though he is difficult to see myself. Unfortunately, this is also
Only when
a
I
violation
copy and
of the
write
precepts,
scriptures every day,
and he is inevitably jealous of the mountain monks, so he has to give up. The paper in the temple is poor, and the pen falls on the paper like an old donkey carrying a load of climbing a mountain. The scholar took a break, shook his wrists and rubbed his temples with his fingers, thinking that it was the same color as the white clouds. At night, Confucian scholars read Buddhist scriptures with lanterns at night, and the bells in the temple chat with each other. The stars are not far from the roof. Early in the morning when I heard the bell, the scholar put on his clothes and shoes, opened the door and opened the window, and the white cloud rushed in through the curtain, unstoppable. The thick cloud was like a quilt. A person is like sitting in chaos, extending his hand and not seeing his 5 fingers, and inside his mouth and nose, there is nothing but cloud gas, which is like drinking and getting drunk. The clouds and mist were slightly lighter, and the little novice monks who had not yet been ordained in the temple brought their food boxes on time. In the sound of the monks chanting, the Confucian scholar with frost and white on his temples was alone in the cloud. A large bowl of white rice porridge, 2 porridge side dishes, and a plate fermented bean curd, a plate of salted and dried vegetables. The scholar raised his head occasionally, a colorful butterfly riding a cloud to play under the eaves outside the house. Bound by an old spider web, his wings could not flutter. The scholar put the bowl and stood up, holding an old bamboo inside the house, rooting the mountain stick to pick the net to save the butterfly. The scholar returned to the table and sat down, chewing slowly. When he saw the old cobweb, he had one more question in his mind, and he should ask the abbot and monk. Precepts and laws, the law is strict and there are occasional other words. Today, a distinguished guest climbed the mountain and entered the temple gate, accompanied by a dozen servants, the head of whom is half 100 years old, speaking elegantly and playing an official accent, graceful and slow, extremely majestic, and the abbot and monk are not seen to greet him. In the living room there are often bursts of laughter. The distinguished guests and the acquaintance monks travel together, stop moving, put their hands behind their backs and stare at the scriptures of the ordination altar. At the beginning of the rain, after the rain, it is easy to be sleepy in the spring. The Confucian scholar just took a nap and just had his first foot, and the familiar little novice knocked on the window and shouted, "Mr. Chen, Mr. Chen." Shanliang Xianjun drove the colorful clouds to Xianxia Manjusri stage. Enough to see. The Confucian scholar left the temple, climbed the mountain with the little novice, and used the bamboo stick to clear the dead wood and pine branches on the mountain road. There are always elegant scholars digging up old bamboo roots, making a mountain stick. In particular, some old vines in the mountains are used for making sticks. They are the favorites of many senior officials, and they are expensive. There are several peaks in this mountain which are often in the clouds and mist, and it is not easy to show their faces to lay people outside the mountain. Looking up at the peaks, the clouds and smoke curled up, like a face-to-face questioning, like a face-to-face life. The temple at the foot of the mountain has a famous name in the history of Aquarius Island, and the incense is still deserted. There are several temples on the mountain, all of which are small and nameless, and the incense is sparse as one can imagine. There is only one temple on this peak near the top of the mountain, with an isolated cloud table and a simple meditation room. Confucian scholars and little novices have come here several times. There are no mountain monks to welcome guests, only the barking of mountain dogs. The mountains here are high and the wind is cool. Even when entering ambush, it is said that monks still need to wear cotton-padded clothes, and there is no need for cooling fans in all seasons. Visitors from outside the mountains occasionally come here to escape the summer heat, all saying that the world is in the sweltering heat. There is a small pool in the courtyard 2 feet deep. Confucian scholars have carefully examined its stone and soil structure, and it seems that no dripping water flows out of the mountains and flows to the world. There is Jushin Cliff next to the ancient temple, and a pavilion is built. Every time the Confucian scholar came here to watch the sea of clouds, he would put on a strange posture, making a fist with his left hand at his waist. Then the little novice will hear a series of extremely strange sounds, and he will listen with his ears open. It seems to be a Buddhist mantra. The little novice can only hear the first and last words. Finally there was a sudden bang like thunder. The little novice asked curiously what it was, but the scholar also smiled without saying a word, only saying that he would know in the future. On the way up the mountain the little novice has good foot strength. After walking several miles he still breathed smoothly and asked casually, "Mr. Chen, what is Xiaoping Xing?" The monks who patrol the mountains in the temple all say that there is a mountain monarch commonly known as a big worm in the mountain. The Confucian smiled and said, "Take the rice when you wash the rice, eat when you eat, recite the scriptures when you recite the scriptures, ring the bell when you ring the bell, and sleep when you sleep." Mr. Chen, these principles have long been in the books, and the abbot also told us. Then take my own example. When talking to you, chatting with Bai Yi, Yu Xian and other seniors, it is similar to the state of mind. This is called a normal mind, but it is difficult. I have been pondering this over the years. Question. Who are they, big men? They are great people and they are all heroes and sages worthy of respect. The little novice touched his bald head. Understood, no matter if Mr. Chen is rich or not, I have the same respect. The scholar smiled knowingly and said, "Very good, this is called having a root of wisdom." The little novice said shyly, "If this is Hugin, then Hugin is too worthless." The scribe smiled and said, "The wisdom of people is like the breath of heaven and earth that you and I breathe. Whether it's worth it depends on how you look at it." The little novice hesitated for a moment and said, "Mr. Chen, I want to ask you something." Mr. Chen is very arrogant, copying scriptures and writing in small script, and the monks in the monastery begged him for copybook fans or couplets, all of which were declined. The Confucian seemed to have guessed the little novice's mind, shook his head and smiled, "Let's not talk about this matter." The little novice sighed. They didn't go to the small temple this time, but went straight to Xianxia mountain pavilion to enjoy the view. After watching the clouds for a while, the Confucian scholar put his left fist on his waist again. As for the mantra he recited, it was the mantra of Samantabhadra Vajrasattva. Following the ritual, visualize from the front like a sea of offerings in the clouds, on the white lotus moon wheel Dharma seat. A stranger came from outside the pavilion, and the little novice hurriedly bowed his head and saluted. Looking at the clear-faced scholar with frosty white temples, he was as thin as a wild crane. Xuanhuan wondered, "Is it you?" The scholar in the Confucian shirt also wondered, "Who are you?" Xuanhuan sneered, "It really is you. Appearance and mood can be changed, but just such a pair of tricks really makes Xuanhuan annoyed." It is no wonder that on a secret espionage report of the Delhi Punishment Department, it is reasonable to say that the wording is extremely serious and exquisite, but there are many fair speeches that are just copied to the intelligence. Some of the comments came from the local swordsman of the Great Wall of Sword Chi, Yuan Huajing was dumbfounded when he saw them, and changed them to be more charming, and he would spray rice every time he mentioned it at the dinner table and wine bureau. From a distance he looks like a liang, but from a closer look he looks like a hidden official. Dogs are real dogs, one more than one dog. Yuan Huajing couldn't understand this. It is said that the Great Wall of Sword Qi had a good impression of these two foreign swordsmen and scholars, but the result was such a bad wind comment. So unscrupulous and spared no effort, still shocking those who have never been to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Just like the national teacher Cui Yu Fengshua Temple Sword Immortal Wei Jin, in Aquarius, how could anyone be so casually ridiculed? Seeing that he recognized him, Qin Pingan laughed heartily and said, "After several discussions in the capital, you don't seem to have sacrificed the flying sword of life at the bottom of the box? It's because you can't win anyway, so just hide it or it's inappropriate. In this world, can't see the light for the time being?" Yuan Huajing was silent. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "It's okay, no one has a shadow under the sun." Yuan Huajing still didn't speak. He hesitated for a while, then climbed the steps and walked into the pavilion. The little novice thought for a while, then said goodbye to a pair of friends who seemed to have met old friends in a foreign land, and went to see the scenery elsewhere. Qin Pingan picked up the robe and jacket with both hands, sat down with his legs raised, patted his knees and said with a smile, "Is this a summer retreat for Yuan Jianxian? Although this mountain is beautiful in shape, it does not have spirits and only prostitutes, and there is no record of emperors enshrining Zen in history." Qin Pingan said, "It's really a good place to live and relax. It can be seen that Yuan Jianxian is really peaceful and happy, and has an indifferent interest." Yuan Huajing said, "You don't need to say these insincere polite words." Qin Pingan sighed and complained, "What's the politeness? Yuan Jianxian and I are the most compatible and there is no taboo between friends, but it's just irony." Yuan Huajing choked for a while. Indeed, among the 9 people from the terrestrial branch in the capital of Dali, he was the least likely to get along with Qin Pingan. Yuan Huajing cleaned up his emotions and said calmly, "I passed by Yufeng by chance in the early years, and I like the cleanliness of this place. Every year in my spare time I will come here to live for a while. There are 9 of us and our identities are not visible. There is a place that is similar to relaxing, incognito, changing face, changing to a different identity when nothing happens, such as Gaiyan, and opening the Xinjiang in the capital." Lu Hui was a county magistrate in a Ji county, and Han Zhoujin was there. Achixian opened a shop. He was his own boss and he did some business of selling tea on the border, and there were people who led the secretary to test orthography. Qin Pingan nodded. "There is a degree of relaxation, and a person who cultivates the Tao can't always have a heartstring." Yuan Huajing asked, "What are you doing here?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Subduing the heart ape." Although Yuan Huajing is far from being a friend, even if he is not a friend he can still chat. When Qin Pingan went down the mountain and returned to the temple at the foot of the mountain, it was already dark night. He studied ink in his residence, spread out the paper and wrote a sentence. "Stay away from all upside-down dreams." The top of splashing ink peak. Lu Chen smiled and said, "If you don't deliberately say something mysterious, then what you see is true and what you hear is false. Generally speaking, it is always right." Shaking his wrists, Lu Chen said, "Human feelings are overturned like palms and life and death are like wheels." Between the words, Lu Chen flicked his fingers and there was a breeze, which touched the eyebrows of a Taoist heavenly monarch. After that, Chao Rong was like opening his eyes, following the vision of his master Lu Chen in the past, and clearly saw an old picture scroll of a long river of time. The scenery is old. Chao Rong couldn't help but watch the scenery. It's no use closing your eyes anyway. Only talking about what you see in your dreams, is it by your eyes? Chao Rong sat cross-legged with his palms facing upwards, stacked on his abdomen as if he were watching Taoism. The young Taoist stooped down and pushed a 2-wheeled wooden cart. There was a sound of rolling wheels on the pitted dirt road, and he entered a dimly lit alley. The Taoist priest recited all the way Buddha bless, Bodhisattva manifested. Stopping outside the gate of a courtyard, the Taoist priest knocked on the door and shouted. After a while, a dark and thin boy with straw sandals finally opened the door. After that there was some small talk. The teenager said that he has a good memory. According to Qin Pingan's subsequent explanation, it is easier for him to remember things when he sees them than when he listens to others. At this time Lu Chen seemed to be annotating and expounding an ancient text, and commented with a smile, "Be careful here, more. This word is used very cleverly by young people." As for how good the memory is, the Taoist asked the young man to make an analogy. The young man said that in his hometown, the firing of porcelain has a process of drawing blanks and a craft called jump knife. The threshold for this craft is not low. There are many dragon kills in the town and Master Yao is the best. But at the beginning of his apprenticeship as a kiln worker, he only read it once and remembered all the details. When Chao Rong saw this, Lu Qin heard, and continued to say, just like Baiyujing's various pedigrees, Lei Fa has a lot of inheritance, and almost all of the 5 cities and 12 floors are involved, but it is recognized that Lei Fa has the highest attainments. Pang Ding, who was in the midst of the war, shook his hand at the unique skill of pressing the bottom of the box, and then there was a Taoist boy who had not yet given the pot. After a few glances from a distance, he said that he had seen it clearly and mastered all the shapes. Chao Rong, what do you think? What is the cultivator's aptitude for this Taoist boy? Chao Rong said with sincere admiration, excellent, shockingly good, enough to be called outstanding. The city owner of Lingbao City, Pang Ding with the Taoist name Humble Heart, the old Taoist priest is known as the first person in the world of thunder. Lu Qin said, this kind of craftsmanship can be roughly understood as a kind of cutting. It is one of Qin Ping's self-created swordsmanship. But at that time it was called being powerless. As Qin Pingan himself said, if you see every detail of Master Yao too clearly, you can see every mistake of yourself. The more mistakes you make, the more anxious you are, the more anxious you are. More mistakes. In the same village there are 2 poor people with no money, one is a poor man who does not know how to write big characters, and the other is a sour scholar who has read a few books. The same. In opinion. Knowing a lot of whys but not being able to solve the problem, may just be the source of the pain. This is actually the crux of many readers. What you know in your heart is one way and what you walk on is another way. Since knowledge and action are inconsistent, tracing back to the source, in fact the body and mind are not the same, the body is here and the heart is there. Therefore the more delicate the mind is, the more painful it will be. The wrong words, the wrong things, and the feeling of regret all stretched into a line on the unattainable road beside you, making people feel unbearable to look back and dare not turn their heads to look. Lu Qin smiled and said, back then I pushed the car and looked for a house so that I could take over the hottest girl in the world. In fact, Qin Pingan didn't need to open the door, he just pretended not to hear it. It's just that he heard a knock on the door. I recognized Pindo's voice and confirmed his identity. It was the Taoist priest who set up a fortune-telling stall on the side of the road, and he still opened the door. At that time Qin Pingan said a but and then there was no further text. I haven't read the book, there is little ink in my stomach and there are many thoughts in my mind. Many words can't be said in my heart. It's better not to say. Chao Rong said with a smile, the most difficult thing in life is just talking. So I went on to say, but my hands and feet never kept up with my thoughts. Hearing Lu Chen's words at that time, the straw shoe boy's eyes lit up, who always gave off a feeling of twilight. What Chao Rong saw in his eyes, or the poor boy in the eyes of Master at this moment, suddenly changed his temperament. It is like a meticulous line drawing that was originally only black and white, and instantly turned into a colorful freehand painting. Speaking of this, Lu Qin smiled, Qin Pingan is like meeting a confidant. Then Lu Qin used another metaphor, it's more like a thirsty person with a dry heart who meets a Daebin person with a water scoop. In this picture scroll of time, the young man said 2 more sentences in succession. I don't understand but most of them remember. In fact, just read it once and remember all the details. Lu Qin said, I used most in the front, which is a general term. When I explained Ning Yao's physical condition he believed it so he used all in the back. You must know that Qin Pingan is a very cautious person who likes to deny himself. Then when he says all, it must be absolutely true with absolute certainty. This is Qin Pingan's character at that time. Just because he doubted the world, he found a few life-saving straws and held on to it. Chao Rong said, this seems to be different from many people. It is precisely because of doubts that they distrust and take denial. Deny yourself, affirm others. It's like slapping yourself in the face. Lu Qin nodded and smiled. There are a few people in the world who like to slap themselves and ask for trouble when they are full. In addition, you have left out a detail. The connection between Qin Pingan's 2 sentences is very interesting. There is a kind of unconscious and natural bridge which can be interpreted as a kind of equivalence, exchange. It comes from Qin Ping's intuition. Taoists in the world are almost all physicians. They will understand how important a person's awareness or somatosensory is. In the final analysis, awareness and somatosensory are the person who cultivates the Tao, his own person. Small world, a keen perception of the big world outside the body. Lu Qin sighed, On this point alone, Qin Pingan deserves the reputation of the ground material. The so-called ground material is the so-called earth immortal qualifications of the ancient times. Chao Rong nodded. Lu Qin said indifferently, "It seems that we all have a tendency to destroy all good things." Chao Rong asked, "In the Confucian 3-4 battle, did the master favor the literary sage?" Lu Qin smiled. "In the long river of time, the Taoists seemed to say something casually, maybe the master didn't have the idea of bringing Qin Pingan into the door at all." Chao Rong raised his head looking strange. Lu Qin nodded and smiled and said, "Naturally it was intentional with ulterior motives and murderous intent." The young man said that he was not as good as an ordinary apprentice, let alone Lu Xianying, so it was not surprising. Chao Rong said, "Dilute the air." Lu Qin laughed at himself. "I was quietly hinting to him that he might as well affirm himself by denying others, but he affirmed others by denying himself. I comforted him with the word steady heart, which is rare. Don't look down on yourself." Lu Qin smiled and said, "In the end, Qin Pingan probably started chatting and he talked a lot. He even gave me an analogy saying that two people were standing in deep and shallow water, and they both caught fish, and then asked me if the two were not different. I almost blurted out at that time and asked him if there are two people they can stand and bend over to catch the fish, or they can go to the depths of the water and they catch the same fish whether it is the same or different." Chao Rong pondered for a moment, then said doubtfully, "Master, this disciple has a question." Lu Qin guessed his thoughts and said with a smile, "I don't understand at all. Why is Qin Pingan on his friend Lu Xianying's side? Why is there not even the slightest bit of jealousy?" Chao Rong nodded. Lu Qin rested his cheek with one hand and was silent for a moment. There is a saying in Buddhist that a bed is placed on a bed, which is of course a derogatory meaning. If you ask where to find a Buddha, you can't put your head on your head. Then what if a tall building rises from the ground and you want to reach a higher level if you want to be poor? What about killing one state of mind with one state of mind? Be careful. As a verb interpretation, be careful with your heart, and in the extreme situation, isn't it Taoist Xinzhai? Another example is the building of the Jingjing Temple. The bones are piled up into mountains. There is only one person standing at the top. This person does not kill but commits suicide. He is dedicated to killing countless thieves in his heart. Chao Rong asked cautiously, "Why does Shizhuan care about Qin Pingan so much?" Lu Qin wrapped his arms around his sleeves. "I once had a whimsical idea, so I won't tell you about it. I'm afraid it will scare you and my Tao heart will collapse on the spot." "How difficult is it to find a suitable reference?" "You can't find me, Lu Qin." Lu Qin can't find his two brothers or Qi Jingchun. Lu Qin said slowly, "Those who know things don't harm you and you don't get in the way." Chao Rong said solemnly, "If you get it in the ring, you can respond to infinity." Lu Qin smiled and said, "This Taoist watch is not for nothing. It seems that the master put away the picture scroll of time, and what Chao Rong sees at this moment is already the scene of the world here." Lu Qin stood up. "Chao Rong, you also cultivate talismans. What's the point of thinking that Qin Pingan took so much trouble to act at the risk of taking so much attention?" Chao Rong said, "The martial arts are endless and full of energy, and you need to watch the mountains and rivers all over." Lu Qin nodded first and then shook his head. "This is one of the reasons, but it is the second one." After a moment of silence, Lu Qin turned his head and said with a smile, "In the beginning I let you take the path of proving the path of Xiaoji's ascension. I deliberately tricked you, otherwise with your cultivation aptitude, there can be many paths of proving the path of ascension, but only this one, you are doomed to fail." Chao Rong was not too shocked or resentful at all. He was just puzzled. He didn't know what the master meant. Lu Qin said, "Chao Rong, you have to start from where there is no doubt in order to truly have no doubt." Lu Qin stretched out his hand, made a pen with his fingers and wrote the word doubt in the air, and then wrote a series of words and idioms related to doubt. The worldly people, if they stare for a long time, stare at a certain word, close their eyes and open them again, it is easy to fail to recognize the word. Lu Qin sighed and said for no reason, "Buddhists say that greed, anger, delusion, slowness and suspicion are the 5 poisonous minds, which create bad karma and hinder cultivation." Chao Rong nodded and said, "If you don't remove the 5 minds, the so-called meditation is always evil, and the supernatural powers you cultivate are not the right way. The demons of the people who cultivate the Tao come from this. The tenets of the 3 religions are different in terms of many things, but they are actually the same." Chao Rong suddenly wanted to understand something and he couldn't hide his surprised expression and asked, "Master, does Qin Pingan use Taoist techniques to form formations, and at the same time use Buddhist methods to eliminate the 5 minds? Since they each perform their own duties and practice, Are you defending yourself again? Lu Qin nodded. This is his real intention and he hides it deeply. That's why I showed up at the Zhuji faction to cut Yushan, and he was uncharacteristically and very angry. It's not that I'm worried about what he'll do. It's just a matter of human nature. I'm afraid that others will see my privacy. If I break it, he'll become angry. Fortunately, the first person I saw Qin Pingan was the old Zhuji sect's out-of-door acquaintance, not the sword-backed boy Qin Ren here or someone else. Otherwise this guy will definitely turn his face. Lu Qin asked, guess who is Qin Pingan in Xuanhuan Mountain? Chao Rong said, since the young man is seriously ill, the first fear is high anger. Could it be anger? Lu Qin shook his head and said, it's wrong, it's a suspicion. Therefore the scabbard on the back is empty. In Yuzhou there is an ancient temple of Luzong. The Buddhists have a saying, cultivate precepts, calm wisdom, and eliminate greed, hatred, and delusion. Lu Qin smiled again and said, a Confucian student in the Dali Temple of the law school not only copied Buddhist scriptures, but also practiced Daomen Lei Fa. What kind of mind do you think he wants to get rid of? Chao Rong said, naturally it is greed. Lu Qin nodded and said, that's why I said earlier that the Tao has its appearance and the sky has its shape. To imitate a landscape you must first capture the landscape outside the painting. It is the heart-wrenching horse and the demon of the heart who are caught. The mountain owner Qin Pingan who stayed in Luobao Mountain is an idiot, so this person is responsible for collecting all the clones that he sees, thinks and wants to break through ignorance. Wu Di, a Taoist priest who set up a stall in the capital of Yushuan Kingdom, was close to the enemy's family, but he was hatred, so Qin Pingan deliberately added fuel to the fire and used this to sharpen his Taoism. Qin Shanju of Luopao Mountain, the last hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi who was watching a ceremony at Jingyang Mountain, how majestic, but he ended up in Chuayu Mountain not far from Jingyang Mountain, and ran to a vassal who was only Jingyang Mountain. The bamboo branch school on the top of the mountain is still an outsider, isn't it? Arrogant? Chao Rong was stunned and speechless. After being silent for a long time, he couldn't help but ask, where is Qin Pingan's real body? Lu Qin smiled and said, in a remote rural village, being a teacher, putting away all identities and magical powers, is no different from ordinary people. Chao Rong was dumbfounded. What kind of brain is this Master Qin Shan? Besides that, Qin Pingan's actions are like practicing swords. He wants to sharpen his 2 flying swords and create 3,000 small thousand worlds. But this matter, you have heard it, don't spread it out. Qin Pingan respects you quite a bit and most likely won't cut you, but he has a good relationship with me so he won't be polite to me. Lu Qin smiled and asked, Chao Rong, do you still think that Qin Ping's move is more than worth the loss? A Big Dipper formation, 7 visible and 2 hidden, a total of 9 clones. This requires the use of 9 talismans, 2 of which are extremely rare Cyan talisman papers, which are rare items that any Confucian Academy gentleman, Taoist true monarch, and Buddhist arhats have to use with caution. And once these talisman clones are sacrificed, the spiritual energy can be replenished, but it will consume the talisman paper itself, so it is time-limited unless it is closed. Chao Rong sighed, as expected of a person who can become a hidden official as a monk from a foreign country. Lu Qin smiled and said, this is so powerful? In fact, Qin Pingan still has a layer of Taoism, which is the 6 arts handed down by the most holy master, and the sentence the gentleman is the 9 clones are not idle. If you are interested, you can guess how each of them performs their duties and I will not reveal the secret to you. Chao Rong shook his head, disciple doesn't bother. If you meet Qin Pingan in the future you just need to take a detour, you can't go around, at most say a few words, the weather is good. Lu Qin said, after all, it's cultivating the Tao, how can it be that simple? There may be such a poem by the master in the future, with a wedge-shaped preface. He was poor at a young age and loved to read. He practiced boxing at the age of 14 and learned swordsmanship at 15. Sword of Coming Chapter 1024, on February 2nd of this year. Located in the middle of Tongye continent, this small country called Yunyan country held a special Zhu Shirtang discussion. Even if you look at the whole continent and look at the history of Tongyishao Mountain, the momentum of this discussion is unprecedented and unprecedented. Yunyan Kingdom is not a vassal state of any big dynasty, and the situation of the basin may not be as big as a state in the Daquan dynasty, so it has always been called the Land of Palms. It is both a vinegar capital and a good ink producer. There are no Xinfu sects in the country, only some unpopular jianghu forces. Just to say that there is a fish-scale ferry outside the capital that can barely be called Xinjia Ferry, or because of this discussion, the Yunyan Qing court was temporarily set up. In the eyes of the immortal master, from the fairy port to the capital, there are various styles and appearances, but there is a sense of poverty and sourness everywhere. Like a poor housewife, exhausting her purse, dressing her makeup in the mirror, smearing powder, and making a smile on her face with the distinguished guests. It has only been a month and a half, and 3 meetings have been held one after another. In the darkness of the night, on the fish scale ferry, a huge ferry was docked, which could be called a behemoth. The nearby ferries on the mountains kept a distance from it, intentionally or unintentionally. There is a fairy in a white robe sitting alone on the railing of the boat, drinking silently like drinking nostalgia. Xianxia had just finished reading the book in the house and came to the deck to relax. When he saw the jiangxian, he said hello softly. Chief Miyu regained his senses, turned his head with a smile, and took out a jug of wine from his sleeve. It's a specialty of the capital. It seems to be called barley wine, but it's a bit bland, so ill drink it. In fact, in the early years in his hometown, the xianxia wine brewing that entered the Jianghu Great Wall through the inverted mountain was often extremely expensive, and the price was several times that of Haoran. At that time, Miyu was always very picky about wine. When Haoran is in the world, Miyu can drink any kind of wine, and he can also enjoy drinking water from the market and local brewing from the village. Xianxia took the jug, nodded and said, "It is recorded in the book that the barley wine here is brewed with barley. The price is cheap and the wine tastes light and elegant, but it is not enough for fast drinkers." Miyu smiled and said, as expected of a proud student of Lord Xuanhuan, his knowledge is complicated and he understands everything. Xianxia smiled and said, "It's a coincidence, I just read the content from a writer's notebook, and am learning and using it now. The country of Yunyan has been a place of scholarly interest since ancient times. The problem is that just to support such a wisteria, this dojo where no one is permanently stationed, must have someone specializing in the maintenance of rare flowers, trees and magical birds including wisteria. This is another huge amount of magic money. In fact, Lu Yuzhou looks good and has a good character. If she didn't really have the habit of eating young grass, she would have married." In the house, in addition to Lu Suiyu, the most promising female master in the White Continent, there is also a woman who is also a martial artist in the 9 realms, but younger than Lu Suiyu. She is Tongya Continent who came to the island not long ago. Yuaofu who speaks to the people of the Yu clan in Tushenzhou. She was seriously injured in the wild world and her face was pale now. Lu Suiyu didn't ask the reason in detail, he only knew that Yufu was a group of people including Chao Ci, and a group of savage cubs who were also young but not low in skills fought a group fight with each other. Can only be said to be a tragic victory. Yuaofu said, "I heard that Yi Yunyun has reached the level of the end." Lu Suiyu interlaced his hands and fingers, held up high, raised his chest, made a stretch, his knuckles creaked, smiled and said, "She is still a fairy in the Jade Pure realm, we are all pure warriors, compared with others I can't be envious." Yuaofu smiled. Indeed, if a chi practitioner could also practice martial arts, it would be more advantageous to only talk about xianxia. Lu Yuzhou never speaks to a woman who has something to say about the black words of the rivers and lakes. Otherwise it will be easy to end up in the wrong place, so it is better to keep silent. Lu Suiyu turned his head to look at Lu Yuzhou. "Lu Gongzi, thanks to you, how many fairies have volunteered to live here, or else they will find a reason to come to the door? Let's just say that the few next door are either playing the piano or playing chess during the day. At night they are still giggling on the swings. Tell me, what are they planning?" Lu Yuzhou smiled. "Aunt Lu, the fairies are multi-talented in addition to cultivating Taoism, which is also the icing on the cake." Yuaofu was about to return to his residence when Lu Suiyu suddenly said, "Sister Yu, do you know that we, the eldest son of Lu, actually belong to us?" Lu Yuzhou blushed and quickly waved his hands. Seeing that it didn't work, he shook his hands together and begged Aunt Lu for mercy. Yufu got up and smiled. "It's not me anyway." Lu Suiyu said, "I still have something to do with you." Yufu asked curiously, "How do you say it? Could it be that this fellow Lu Yuzhou has a crush on a certain Yu family woman?" Lu Yuzhou coughed a few times and secretly gestured with one hand, implying that Aunt Lu hush money easy to discuss. Lu Suiyu glanced at him. Young Master Lu was stingy and sent beggars away. Seeing that the situation was not good, Lu Yuzhou quickly changed his gestures and directly doubled the price. Only then did Lu Suiyu change his tune. "Actually, it doesn't matter, it's not interesting to turn around, let's not talk about it." Yufu thought about it for a while and asked in doubt, "It can't be Pei Qian, right?" Lu Suiyu laughed loudly. "It's not what I said, the money has to be paid." Lu Yuzhou sighed, and Aunt Shui Lu was paralyzed against the back of the chair. posing as if a dead pig was not afraid of being scalded by boiling water, and had no love for life. Yu Yufu looked at Lu Yuzhou with pity in his eyes and held back his smile. What do you think, you like Pei Qian? With a guilty conscience, Lu Yuzhou pretended to be calm and said, I don't like it either. Yu Yufu smiled and said, you have nothing to do with me. Look at how stupid you are. You just didn't engrave the word like on your forehead. Because she and Lu Yuzhou have known each other for a long time, there is no taboo when speaking. Back then at an ancient battlefield site in Jinjiazu, Lu Yuzhou has seen her and Chao Sis many questions with his own eyes. Now, whether it is the vast world or the wild world, the most powerful word in every realm of martial arts has a higher gold content, and of course more martial arts gifts are obtained. When Yu Aofu was a young girl, he once asked his ancestor and senior Zhou Xinji a question that very few people cared about. There is a gate on Upside Down Mountain which connects the vast world and the Great Wall of Sword Qi, which in turn borders the wild world. Does this count as two worlds being drawn together by a single line? Just like Beiju Luzhou, there is an old Jidu with two sea entrances from east to west. At least in terms of territory, it is equivalent to dividing Beiju Luzhou in two. Isn't it still a Beiju Luzhou? Why have the two worlds, for thousands of years, have always been the strongest warriors in their own way? Senior Zhou and Yu Panshui were unable to give a definite answer back then. Because he was extremely fond of Yu Yufu. Zhou Xinji, the great sword immortal who was one of the 10 people in the divine continent of the Middle Earth in the past, also made a special trip to ask a good associate leader of the Confucian Temple for advice on this matter, but was used by the master. I was fooled by a Confucian statement involving orthodox, and the other party was serious, but the face was full of, I'm just talking nonsense, whoever believes it is an idiot. Therefore Zhou Xinji on Yu Aofu's side just copied the wording, and talked with her about some mysterious reasons for the inconsistency in reality. In the end Lao Jianxian had to add a sentence. After that, it was Yu Panshui who suddenly took the initiative to find Yu Aofu, and said that he had a guess and asked a good friend on the mountain, but he could not confirm the truth. You agreed in advance that as long as you become the deputy sect master, you can take care of everything and you can take care of everything. In fact, Yu Aofu thinks that Guqin is thinking wrong and doesn't understand Lu Yu's temper at all. Otherwise, how could he think he would agree to such a filiac request? To be honest, Yu Aofu has seen quite a few monks and wealthy children on the mountain, and Lu Yuzhou is the only one who is so loose. To put it nicely, it means having no desires and desires. To say it badly, it means to have no ambitions, and just lie down and enjoy happiness among the rich and noble. But no matter what, it is certain that Lu Yuzhou is not a fool. Sure enough, Lu Yuzhou smiled and waved his hand. Yu Yufu looked strange and said, Guqin still has a gift for you. She took out a wooden box from what was close at hand. It was a treasure inlay process under the mountain. Countless gold and silver jewelry, coral jade, crystal agate, turquoise, ivory and beeswax are inlaid together to create landscapes, characters, flowers, trees, animals, birds, pavilions, lofts, palaces and palaces. The wooden box is not big, but it is colorful, which is indescribable. Lu Yuzhou smiled, took the wooden box inlaid with treasures and shook it gently. Say thanks to Guqin and say that I like this wooden box very much. Yu Aofu nodded and said, I will send a letter from Feijin to Guqin. He is now in Aquarius. The two sides chatted while walking, and when they arrived at the painting table in the side hall, there were more than a dozen painting and calligraphy cylinders on the table, filled with painting scrolls of different materials. Above the case, stall opening a picture scroll, Lu Yuzhou spent a golden belly with yellow eyebrows hanging upside down on a vine of the high-flying lily. Lu Yuzhou put the wooden box aside and said with a smile, Nowadays the art world is not good. In order to make money, counterfeiting is common. Of course, some people have difficulties. In order to support their families, they have to follow the trend. I must change this style. It's a crooked style. I just say that I have traveled all over the world over the years, and I have seen countless murals, and now I am writing again, and I dare to say that I am young, and it already has the meaning of decaying years and reforms. If it's a shameless person, it's okay to brag about it over there. The problem is that Yu Aofu can be sure that when it comes to painting, Lu Yuzhou is very serious and serious. Yu Aofu asked casually, Since you have no talent, why do you still like to paint? Lu Yuzhou was stunned. Why don't you have talent? Thousands of years later, I can't say the style of this line, I am the originator of the mountain. Yu Yufu said angrily, Tell me the truth. Lu Yuzhou smiled and said, This is the truth. But then again, I do have an idea. No matter how good or bad the painting is, it's nothing more than a fake. After Yu Aofu left, Lu Yuzhou held his cheek with one hand and stared blankly at the wooden box on the table. Lu Yuzhou has a very hidden hobby. He never mentioned it to anyone, not even with his parents. In the depths of Lu Yuzhou's heart, there is a very special desire to control that is absolutely harmless to others. To be precise, to visualize it is a configuration similar to Go. Allotment is the meaning of allocating and filling the vacancies, and setting aside means setting aside and setting up. Because he is the only candidate for the next head of the family of the Aizhou Lu family, Lu Yuzhou is not a fool, nor is he hypocritical, and he is foolish to return all the things he was born with. So how to allocate those things and money that are destined to be spent in several lifetimes has become Lu Yuzhou's only schoolwork. It just so happens that he likes to do this by nature. He is notoriously extravagant, and likes to borrow treasures the most. Lu Yuzhou enjoys the sense of accomplishment brought about by distribution and supplementation. Lu Yuzhou understood what Guqin meant. The sect of Guqin is a hollow wooden box. It is an empty shelf for the time being. Then, as long as Lu Yuzhou is willing to serve as the deputy suzerain, since Guqin promised to take care of everything, Lu Yuzhou can make various arrangements as he pleases. In the Lu family, Lu Yuzhou cannot do this, not to mention that his father has the hope of entering the 14th realm. Take a step back and say that even if his father resigns as the head of the family tomorrow, Lu Yuzhou will not be able to be a new head of the family. There are too many constraints. There are too many constraints, a huge family, there are too many trade-offs and sophistication. Lu Yuzhou admits that he is not good at dealing with these, his strengths and interests are just icing on the cake. Lu Yuzhou sighed, reached out and patted the wooden box. Guqin never masked but a confidant. A late-night snack stall on the side of the street. Xianhu was burying his head in eating a casserole, and when he looked up, he found a young man in white with a Chinese character sitting across the table. He ordered 2 casseroles directly from the stall owner in extremely skilled Yunyan Mandarin. Xianhu didn't take it seriously and regarded the other party as someone from the capital, or a chi practitioner. In fact, there were still 2 empty tables in the stall, but the other party chose to join the table, and Xianhu didn't bother to care about anything. After all, he was a sage of the academy, so the other party couldn't possibly lift the table and cut people. But if you want to say that you know your identity through some channels on the mountain, and come to get close, the other party has really found the wrong person. In the past at Dafu Academy, Xianhu had comments that he could only read dead books, was a nerd, was ignorant of world affairs and would not be flexible. He doesn't like that kind of staggered banquet and entertainment. I believe that in this capital just tonight, there are many cups and cups on the mountain and down the mountain. Although Xianhu knows that many times the sophistication at the table is necessary and useful, and it can really bring closer the relationship, such as whoever gets together to make a familiar face, and who claims to be friends with the outside world, yes, really take the opportunity to make money. In the final analysis, it is to do what they like and get what they want. It's just that Xianhu knows that he is not suitable for doing these things and he is not good at it. The young man on the opposite side puffed out his cheeks, blew hard, his eyes rolled and looked at Xianhu carefully. When Xianhu finished eating the casserole and even drank the soup at the bottom of the pot, and was about to check out and leave, the young man said with a smile, "Brother Yang, let's go now, I have ordered more casserole for you, don't worry. Let's go, let's eat and talk." While speaking, the young man pushed the casserole towards Xianhu, smiling and showing great hospitality. Xianhu wondered, "You know me?" The young man nodded vigorously, "Yes, how could I not know Brother Yang? You and my husband are good friends at first sight and we made an appointment for a drink with our chief show." Yang Pu's heart moved slightly and he immediately said in his heart, "Are you a genealogy cultivator of Qingping Sword Sect? Or a student of Mr. Qin?" The young man's face was full of shock and his voice trembled slightly. "Could it be that big brother Yang can do fortune-telling? Can you guess this?" Pu choked for a moment. Is this person really speaking ironically? Just seeing the other party's sincere expression, it didn't seem like he was joking and he would be a little unsure for a while. Pu had to smile. "It's not particularly difficult to guess, right?" Earlier at the gate of Taiping Mountain, Pu met Qin Pingan and Jiangxiang. The key word in the other party's words is of course the chief Zhou, who seems to be a secret language. Jiangxiang of Jade Guizhong, the old sect master of Jiang, is the chief worshipper of the Luopao Mountain in Aquarius Island in the north. This matter is not well known on Tonggishao Mountain now. As for Yang Pu's acquaintance with Qin Pingan and Jiangxiang, he is not the kind of person who likes to talk about who he knows, so now in the entire Dafu Academy, there are only 3 senior and deputy mountain chiefs who know about it. Since the other party is Mr. Chen's disciple, Pu generously moved the casserole over, picked up the chopsticks again, rolled a large chopsticks into his mouth, and asked with a vague smile, "What's your name?" The young man smiled and said, "I'm a proud student of my husband. There's no such thing as one. My surname is Chui and my name is Dongshan. Big brother Yang can call me Dongshan, but it's more cordial to call me brother Chui." Now it was Yang Pu's turn to be shocked. Sect Master Chui? The Qingping sword sect was very powerful and attracted people's attention this time at the temporary establishment of the Zushi Hall, but Chui Dongshan did not show up in the capital. I never thought that I would meet this master of a sect whose identity, origin and realm are all cloudy and foggy at the night market. After all, there are only a few suzerains in Tong Yezhou, which is so big now. It can be counted on one hand. Youth patted his cheek with chopsticks. When you go out, you have to keep a low profile, so you use some tricks to avoid getting slapped by flies, which is very annoying. Yang Pu said seriously, "I don't know if Sect Master Chui will see me tonight. What advice do you have?" As for the humorous statement about the fly, Yang Pu should not have heard it. Chui Dongshan sighed in a signature style of Wenxing, "Teach me a hammer, brother Yang is an elder. I'm going out tonight to relax, just wandering around by myself. Just by chance I accidentally saw Yuan Ting Yuji. Big brother Yang is sitting here, and my younger brother can just treat the guest once, so I can go back and take credit with Mr. Chui." Dongshan asked, "Brother Yang is good at compiling books or not?" After knowing the identity of the other party, Yang Pu seemed relaxed and more casual and joked, "As good as dealing with people. Compiling a series of books is a huge project, and first of all, it is necessary to choose the best manuscript. One or two chief editors must take the lead, there are several editors, and the number of school clerks is extremely large. Let's just talk about this Yunyan country. The only feat in history that can be used to speak is that it once used the power of the whole country to call more than 3,000 officials, scholars and copywriters. It took 10 years to compile a book. A tome series that is well known across the continent." Chui Dongshan said regretfully, "Forget it, I originally wanted to bring big brother Yang to help my younger brother to be courageous and go see someone together." Yang Pu was at a loss, didn't break the casserole and asked the question to the end, only to see that Sect Master Chui stood up and said goodbye, and then walked away from the street, just walking. Not walking, jumping, shaking his head as if he was walking dodge and punch. Chui Dongshan walked straight out of the capital, neither walking against the wind nor taking out the ferry. The boy in white just dangled his sleeves, walked on foot, looked up at the white jade plate, his sleeves flew up, "Hey, hard work is the most pity in the sky moon, meet you every night with you." Lu Mao followed him silently, and he had to admit that he was certain that he would form a pill in this retreat, but without the horizontal step of the boy in white during the retreat, Lu Mao didn't think he could dan into the 3rd grade, earning the atmosphere of the Dan room that I did not dare to expect beforehand, but it was purely an accidental joy. The purple air was transpiring, and the Dan room was used as a book city, with 50,000 scrolls inserted. On the mountain, it is said that the legendary Danqing is the 1st grade, and it is a surefire candidate for ascension. For example, Zhao Tianlai, the Tianshi of Longhu Mountain, the real person of Huolong, and the self-titled owner of the 72 Peaks, Wei Shi, are all there. This column. However, the Ascension Realm Great Cultivator formed pills in his early years, and most of them were 2nd-rank pills, so the 3rd-rank pill was still the dream of many Earth immortals. In return, Lu Mao needed to assist the first suzerain of the Qingping sword sect to quietly complete one thing and develop a seismometer that could accurately measure the changes in the mountains and rivers of Tonggishao. Lu Mao can't help but refuse to agree, but this kind of feat, isn't it Lu Mao's thoughts, but it can only always be a beautiful thing in the attic in the sky? Chui Dongshan asked casually, "The chicken distance pen that you improved is pleasing to my eye, and the 2nd batch is sold. Has your Majesty the Emperor found a good home?" Lu Mao answered truthfully, "His Majesty's plans there is no way to know. The former Daquan dynasty, which was so poor that it was impossible to open the pot, set up a new office in the construction office. Yao Jinji, intentionally or unintentionally, built the factory site at the Lotus Bridge near the Baoquan Bureau of the Ministry of Housing and Sangchang Yamen, which is only a few meters away from Lu Mao's Xuanhuan Temple. Footpath. The last time His Majesty the Emperor visited the Taoist temple in person and had a talk with Lu Mao. Not long after His Majesty returned to the palace, Lu Mao had a noble and powerful beauty official, and also obtained a secret enshrining status as an official in the Ministry of Punishment. With Mao's help, the secretary of the office soon became a cash cow and a cornucopia of the imperial court. The main purpose is to create the kind of imperial system chicken distance pen, which is now exported to the immortal mansion on the mountain and the countries under the mountain in the north and south of a continent. Cui Dongshan said with a smile, "Things of 10 taels of silver are sold at the price of 1 snow money. Mr. Fan and Baozhai Zhangji from the merchant saw it, and I am afraid they will drool." Lu Mao hesitated, but he still held back. "The biggest hero, isn't it your husband?" For the first batch of chicken pitch pens, De Quan Yao's really no longer has to look for a buyer, because Jade Guizhong has ordered a full 30,000 chicken pitch pens, which will be bundled with the Luomei paper secretly made by Jiang's Cloud Cave Blessed Land. The price of a chicken-spaced pen under the guise of Imperial System is 1 snow money, which is a full 1,000 taels of silver. But in fact, the cost of the materials consumed is probably around 7 or 8 taels of silver. At most, some cloud patterns and auspicious words are added, and the labor costs of skilled craftsmen will not exceed 10 taels of silver. No wonder Lu Mao heard that the price would be staggering. The price set by the imperial court is really too black-hearted. But anyway, it is to make money from the immortal masters on the mountain and the dignitaries of various countries, and it can't be used by the poor. Besides, Lu Mao, a Taoist priest, has completely drawn a clear line with the identity of the prince of the previous dynasty. Especially Lu Mao has just formed a golden elixir not long ago. Becoming a legendary land fairy, he is no longer interested in these secular disputes, or the situation forced him to make a choice without knowing his philosophy. Cui Dongshan had eaten the remaining stinky tofu, and threw the bamboo sticks as hidden weapons one by one, shouting swish swish. Then he hiccuped. Cui Dongshan twisted his wrist to create an extra bamboo utensil, and said with a smile, "Longzhou Immortal Chief, will you fiddle with this?" Lu Mao nodded. He had a wide range of knowledge and naturally recognized this bamboo drum, which is commonly known as the fishing drum in the folk, and also has a name in Taoism, the Tao drum, which is slightly different from the fishing drum. In the past, some literati in the court and the opposition in Dequan also liked to play with this thing, playing fishing drums, singing Taoist songs, and reciting a moral Huang Ting. When Lu Mao was still the prince of Dequan, he was famous for his elegance. Cui Dongshan knocked on the drum for himself, but deliberately walked the board, making Lu Mao, an expert, only feel noisy. You must know that Lu Mao is a person with obsessive-compulsive disorder, so it is more difficult to endure. When Qin Pingan was in the Taoist study, but the books were placed in the wrong place, Lu Mao would feel awkward. On this deserted and lonely official road, Cui Dongshan joked with Lu Mao while jumping and screaming, "The great Sui Gao clan of Beipingzu, the country has 1,200 years, a full 1,000 years and 200 years, that is, back then the territory of Aquarius Island was small, and no one looked down on it, otherwise it would scare people to death. In the history of Middle-earth Shenzhou, how many dynasties were able to live such a long life? Do you know where Gao's Longxing land is?" Cui Dongshan stood on tiptoe, looked into the distance and said, "Friend Longzhou, we have to hurry up." Lu Mao nodded. After forming the pill, Qi practitioners can shrink the ley lines and cross mountains and rivers, such as crossing fields, ridges and ditches. To be honest, if Cui Dongshan had not become an earth immortal and was held in his sleeve by Cui Dongshan, he would occasionally be able to fall out like this at night to breathe. Otherwise, Lu Mao would have long wanted to find a secluded place to practice and use various earth immortal magical powers. Shrinking the mountains and rivers, chasing the sun and the moon, ascending to the sky and flying in the daytime. It's just that Cui Dongshan didn't shrink the ground or ride the wind, but resorted to a crappy method that made Lu Mao cry and laugh. Armored equestrianism and fast walking are the most commonly used mountain immortal techniques for monks in the lower 5 realms. Lu Mao saw that Cui Dongshan was seriously writing the name of an ancient on his forehead, then squatted down, tied a red book rune on his leg, stood up, shook his wrist and jumped vigorously a few times. Then Cui Dongshan shook out a rune horse from the snow-white sleeve that looked like a treasure box, and when it landed it was a snow-white horse. "Taoist Longzhou, what are you doing? Get on your horse. This is the shining lion horse that is often seen in the romance of Jianghu. It is more than 10 feet long from head to tail and 8 feet high from hoof to ridge. It is extraordinary and can travel thousands of miles a day and 800 nights. I'm on my way relying on foreign objects, so I don't have enough money for Taoism." Between the words, the boy in white rushed forward, opened his throat and shouted with a loud laugh, "Let's go through the clouds and fog." Lu Mao rode on the talisman horse, one person at a time, as fast as thunder on the post road. All of them were blurred, as if stretching out a white train. Cui Dongshan ran wildly all the way, waving his hands and galloping, "Union Kingdom, Ha Shao Union, we Shao Jianxian should really come here for a stroll." Only then did Lu Mao know that he had come to Yunyan country. After that, Cui Dongshan entered a county, in the land of Yunyan Kingdom Jianghu in Xixian County, where there are as many as 6 county magistrates alone. Cui Dongshan put away those gods and gods, and then retrieved the talisman from Lu Mao's hand. The horse, familiar with the door and the road, walked through the streets and alleys, and finally brought Lu Mao to a closed bookstore. In fact, almost the entire street is filled with bookstores. Cui Dongshan stood at the door and asked, "Do you know why the entire Jianghu region of Yunyan Kingdom has not suffered from wars?" Lu Mao shook his head and said, "I don't know." It turned out that the boy with a face with a Chinese character, wearing white clothes, rolled over and fell to the ground after his whereabouts were discovered. I saw that when the white-clothed boy landed, he looked like he had a sprained foot, his face was sullen at first, and then he couldn't bear the pain for a long time. The scribe frowned and reminded, "Silence." The boy with the national character face patted his stomach. "I'm a little hungry, I don't know if there is any food here, white rice is enough, no wine and vegetables, I'm the best person I can handle." The scribe remained silent, just quietly watching this unidentified, uninvited guest. The young man laughed and said, "But it's better to use that kind of hard-working firewood, such as dismantling the legs of an old car. I don't know if you have it here?" The scribe narrowed his eyes, his face was gloomy, and he stared at this seemingly open-mouthed young man. But the boy in white put his hands behind his back and looked at a hanging portrait on the wall. "Hey, what a coincidence, it happened to enshrine Mr. Gongzeng, a good official. The identity of this other person, let me guess. It is said that good paper can live for thousands of years, but what is the truth? Improper storage of books, moth-eaten, moldy paper, etc., are all small calamities. Wait, it belongs to the middle calamity. It is the soldiers and the imperial court that ordered the destruction of the forbidden books. These are the great calamities of the books." Speaking of which, the young man looked down and looked at the ancient books on the table. If every ancient book can be passed down for hundreds of years, it is not the protection of ghosts and gods, right? The young man then retracted his gaze, turned his head to look at the scribe and said with a smile, "You are an uncompromising and meritorious minister. After all, you have left some literary luck for Tong Yezhou." The scribe laughed at himself. "It's just self-preservation, it can't be called meritorious." Cui Dongshan nodded and said, "Of course I'm just saying a polite word to you. My husband taught me that sweetness can be used as money when you go out." Cui Dongshan nodded to himself and said, "When you're out, do someone a favor and help. Helping people is worthless, why not do it?" The scribe twitched the corners of his mouth and said, "It seems that fellow Taoist has a good gentleman. There are immortals and Buddhas in the family, and there is the true way for daily use. If you enter the room of Zhilan, the secret palace of Linlang, you can be sages even if you are not holy." The boy in white put his hands on his back and laughed. "My husband also heard the truth of not spending money from the old man in his hometown." The scribe said, "If fellow Taoists have finished speaking, then I will issue an expulsion order." The originator's forces, such as Yu Guizhong, worshipped Wang Ji, and there was an old patriarch who was very senior but unknown in foreign nationality. Of course, there is also the Qingping sword sect who was born in the sky. They are Chong Qiu, who is at the helm of Xuanhu, and Chao Qingqing, the master of Jingxing Peak. For some reason, Miyu, the great sword immortal who was the chief enshrined, actually gave the seat of the patriarch hall to the young Chao Qingqing. So why not take a great sword immortal from the Great Wall of Sword Qi seriously? Miyu, who has the nickname of Ms. Waste, really won't hold grudges about it? Cui Dongshan closed the folding fan and said with a smile, "As long as you agree to my invitation, I can in turn promise you one thing as a greeting. Believe me, that is something that you have been thinking about for thousands of years, and it will definitely make you get it. Get what you want." "Oh, could it be that sect Master Cui can read minds?" "Mind reading? Nothing, I'm better at guessing people's thoughts." The scholar of Yunyan Kingdom, who was born from the manifestation of the literary movement, smiled and said, "Tell me about it." Cui Dongshan said, "I will take you to the Zhongtu Confucian Temple in the future to exchange knowledge with Jingsheng Shiping." "Really? Take it seriously, it must be taken seriously." Cui Dongshan patted his chest and said, "My husband, am a good friend who has never met before, dear friend." The scribe pondered for a moment and said, "Let me think about it." Cui Dongshan nodded and said, "That's right." The scribe suddenly asked, "Aren't you afraid that I will collude with him?" Cui Dongshan sighed, "You're such a scrap, you think too highly of yourself. The reason why I ask this is just curious." When he stood here he was crying silently and crying. Cui Dongshan hurriedly defended himself. "Don't be angry, I'm a straight talker but a knife with a bean-curd heart. Don't you believe me?" The boy in white sighed, full of the smell of stinky tofu. The scribe was dumbfounded. Cui Dongshan tapped his fan on his shoulder and smiled. The barbarian culture is meticulous, and suffers from ignorance of confidence in the world. It is only said that many years ago Houran Jiasheng, who left his hometown, once stood on the hanging mountain for a long time, looking north at his hometown alone. Cui Dongshan suddenly stretched out his hand to cover his mouth. Since it's my own family, I have to make a small report with you. A thief stole your engraving plate. It's hateful and hateful, let's beat him. The capital of Xuanhuan Kingdom, Yongjia County. In an alley, a Taoist priest stopped abruptly, looked into a small courtyard and let out a sigh. In the courtyard, there was a slender young man who was weaving a dustpan under the light of the moonlight. His ears were sharp and he was startled at first. When he turned his head to look at the other side of the alley and crossed the low wall, he saw that familiar face. A dark young man full of his face was surprised, he couldn't believe it and murmured, "Wu Daochang?" The Taoist twitched his beard and smiled, "It's purely a coincidence that we met again." The boy hurriedly put down the dustpan half woven in his hand, got up and walked to the low wall, and asked in surprise, "Wu Daochang is this?" In the middle of the night, Daochang Wu couldn't come here to admire the moon, right? The Taoist priest looked around and said solemnly, "Recently there are monsters in the capital, and the Taoism is not shallow, rampant, and good at hiding and escaping. Tonight, Pindao is tracking the other side's tracks all the way to this point. I never thought about it or let it escape. In a good place in the country, under the feet of the emperor, so arrogant and lawless, the poor Dao naturally can't bear it. Generally, a cultivator who knows a little bit of magic is powerless to deal with it. Oh, but since you encounter a poor Dao, let it be this trip down the mountain to go out. I haven't read the almanac." Teenager is bewildered. Seeing this, the Taoist priest changed to a simple and easy-to-understand vernacular. There is a monster who has become a spirit, and he goes down the mountain to harm people. The young man's eyes lit up for a moment and sure enough, he was guessed by himself. This Taoist Wu, who is very immortal at first glance, is definitely not only a fortune teller to make money, he is really the kind of immortal who can subdue demons and eliminate demons. The walls of the yellow mud courtyard are not high, and the two sides have a dialogue on the partition wall. The teenagers in the hospital were short and thin, while the Taoist priests in the alley were slender and a head taller. The young man was worried and asked in a low voice, "Daochang Wu, the monster has escaped, will it harm anyone?" Since Pindao has appeared and played with it, it already knows how powerful it is, and it will definitely not dare to show up in the capital tonight, and will only find a place to hide. The Taoist smiled and said, "Besides, it was only temporarily escaped from sight. Pindao has several unique immortal methods and he guarantees that he will win it before dawn and he will be sure." The young man secretly backed his hands, rubbed his sackcloth clothes and got up his courage, said with a face, "Wu Daochang sit inside?" The Taoist snorted, "All right, I'll drink it with you. The water doesn't need to be boiled. If you have a water tank you can just pour a spoonful of well water into it." The young man opened the door of the courtyard and led the Taoist priest into the courtyard. He first let the Taoist Wu sit on the bench and he immediately went to the kitchen to spoon water. The Taoist priest was really not particular about sitting on a stool, but just sat straight on the steps. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Could it be that Yuan Zhenxian thinks that what I'm asking for has collided with your purpose of coming here, and it can't be beaten so he has to go down the mountain overnight, which can not only help the Taoist friend in the mountain to find a solution, but also come to my side find out the answer is yes you have to die, otherwise Yuan Zhenxian still has a chance." Yuan Huajing nodded and admitted generously, "I do have this idea." Qin Pingan said, "If you say that I came here for nothing, you certainly don't believe it, but no matter what you think I just treat people with sincerity, and I have nothing outside my heart. What I ask for is indeed not outside my body." Two were silent for a while. Qin Pingan was the first to speak and asked curiously, "What kind of treasure is it worth Yuan Jiangxian's attention?" Aware of Qin Pingan's strange expression, Yuan Huajing said angrily, "Whether it is a son of the Yuan family or a sword cultivator, there is no reason to not ask for it or take it by force." Qin Pingan nodded. Yuan Huajing still had some conceit and arrogance. Yuan Huajing suddenly asked, "Have you seen the chicken soup monk, the monk Xinqing?" Qin Pingan nodded. "When I participated in the discussion in the Confucian temple, I saw this Buddhist dragon elephant from afar, but I never talked." "Then have you heard about the three guardians of this Buddhist dragon elephant?" Qin Pingan shook his head. It was the first time he heard about such secrets. Seeing Yuan Huajing's skepticism, he could only explain with a smile, Believe it or not, I have learned a lot about the Buddhist koan for so many years, but this it's true that I don't really explore the secret things on the mountain. Yuan Huajing was very suspicious, so he roughly explained the 3 dharma guarding sessions. The first dharma guarding of the monk Xinqing was the sutra on the back of a white horse, and the dharma was passed on to the east. The second time in the Qingming world, there was a far-reaching debate on Buddhism and Taoism. Many Taoists failed in their debates. They shaved their hair on the spot as promised, changed their doors and transferred to Buddhism. The third Taoist guard was at Dongshan Temple in Pota Mountain, where he did not choose his routes and opened the door of the Dharma, secretly escorting a young monk down the mountain to a ferry. When Qin Pingan heard this, he nodded lightly. Yuan Huajing asked, "Since you are proficient in gold and stone seal carving, you must know that there is a bright red seal in the world, but there is no text." Qin Pingan said solemnly, "Of course, it was a piece of pounding rice dropped by that Zen patriarch. Back then, he went up the mountain to ask the 5th patriarch and first entered the temple to do rice-pounding labor. Because of his thin body, the 6th patriarch had to pound the rice with the waste stone." Sword of Coming Chapter 1026. At the top of Splashing Mo Peak, Chao Tianjun looked up at the sky and asked, "Master, is Yuxian the right way?" Lu Qin knew the result without looking up at the sky, nodded and said, "It's done. There are 14 more monks in Taoism, luckily even." Chao Rong didn't look back for a long time. Lu Qin whispered, "Old Xiaotsai is a good teacher, no wonder he prefers closed disciples. In this matter, Qin Pingan is most like his old scholar." Wen Sheng's line of incense is not very popular. Among the several direct disciples, Cui Yu and Qi Jingchun are not ordinary in terms of learning. As for Zhuozhua and Jun Qian, they are relatively inferior, and they do not like to reason with others. Among them, Cui Yu has only a few so-called disciples, only a handful of them can be counted on one's fingers, and they are far from being a peaches and plums. After a long time, I went to Lizidongshan and became a Mr. Mengguan, so if you want to be a good teacher, Qin Pingan is indeed the most like an old scholar. The mountain is high and the moon is small, and the moon is small and he jiao. Chao Rong couldn't help but sigh. No one can surpass Mr. Wensheng's protection. As a direct disciple of Lu Qin, Chao Rong and Wensheng have a very good relationship, otherwise it would be impossible to ask for a monogram from Cui Yu. In fact, not long after the establishment of Xianxia Academy, Chao Rong listened to it. Qi Jingchun's lectures have benefited a lot. One time when he left the customs at Lingfei Temple, he was very quiet and moved. He went down the mountain and went to the sea to travel to the pond occupied by Mrs. Tundun. The latter just asked the Taoist heavenly monarch if he knew Pei Mint's whereabouts. Chao Rong replied that he didn't know, nodded left and right without any extra greetings. Chao Rong was about to ask why he was looking for that person. Senior Pei, one of the 3 great masters of Haoran, was already thousands of miles away in the blink of an eye. In an unexpected encounter at sea, the 2 men of Taoism ended up talking about less than 10 words. At that time Mrs. Tundun, who was nicknamed Qing Zhong, hid in the distance timidly, and only dared to show up when she left and right. She had obviously suffered from the sword cultivator. Sure enough, according to rumors, Wen Sheng's second disciple had a bad temper when he was studying, and his temper became even more irritable after practicing swordsmanship. Lu Qin said, "Humans, if you don't love your relatives, how can you be transitory?" Chao Rong asked cautiously, "Master, can we return to Haoran then?" Lu Qin raised his voice abruptly and in a resolute tone, he said 3 words, "What a big question." Chao Rong was stunned and waited for the next paragraph. The level of killing power of Qi practitioners under the 14th realm is still very good to judge, the depth of the accumulation of spiritual energy, the development of Qi palace, the types of magical powers mastered, the number of magic weapons, the combination of natal objects, whether there is a pressure box bottom the killer's trump card, the hidden unique skills. Most of them can be quantified and made some paper articles. But once the great cultivator joins the road and enters the 14th realm, it is a confused account. Lu Qin behaved strangely, pouring out a pot of spring sleepy wine out of the wine pot. The green wine was suspended in the air, condensing into a thin stream of water, like a pocket ditch, illuminated by the moonlight. Lu Qin said slowly, "Since the old immortal you can monopolize the word talisman on the Haoran world side, it is of course a very lethal ascension realm, one of the strongest players similar to chess, not a mediocre or weak player. The hand can be comparable. The most important thing is that the talisman can be transformed into thousands of spells, flying swords, thunder spells, asking God to come down, etc., all of which can achieve similar effects with the talisman. This is the unique innate advantage of the talisman. Xian's ascension realm, in any world, is the kind of ascension realm that is very capable. As for our palace master Wu, under the 14 realms, he also followed a path similar to that of Yuxian Fulu, quietly learned a lot of techniques, and was proficient in everything, not the kind of half-hearted person who is not good at all. So if when both sides are in the ascension realm, they meet on a narrow road, and if they have to decide whether to win or lose, I believe the fight will be very good. It will take a long time, and the means will be repeated, and it will definitely be exciting. Chao Rong nodded when he heard the words. There are some enduring sayings on the mountain. In addition to the one sword breaks all methods used to praise Jianxio, there is also, the talisman is the sky and covers everything. Among the main categories of cultivation on the mountain, Jianxio and Fulu monks are very special existences. Different from playing chess and calligraphy, the threshold is not high, and the two pulses of Jianxio, Fulu, and Qi practitioners, if you do, you can do it, and you can't do it. Suddenly, the surrounding scenery changed suddenly, and he came to the foot of a mountain, and it was a misty dawn scene with drizzle. Chao Rong didn't feel surprised. His heart didn't have the slightest ripple, and he regarded it as a reward with the master who had reunited for a long time. The scene is clear, the master and the apprentice are standing in the same place, motionless, but their figure is as fast as an immortal. Chao Rong looked around and guessed that it should be a famous mountain, the essence of heaven and earth, and the spiritual energy of immortal mountains. If it was me on that boat, I would not be willing to face such a situation. I just said that if I am not careful, if I am in a fight, I need to confront the boss Jianxian, who is not afraid of being hit by Chen Qingda's sword. This is the first time Chao Rong has heard of such secrets, but he just doesn't know what Wu Shuangjiang secretly sneaks into the Haoran world. What is he asking for? It can't be just to try to see the weight of Chen Yingguan and Ning Yao, right? Or is it that Wu Shuangjiang wants to join forces with Chen Pinggan and Luo Peishan, Ning Yao and Wu Cai Tianxia Feishing City to conspire against Bai Yujing? There is a bridge in the distance, and the lake surface is like a whole piece of green-colored glass. Chao Rong suddenly found that among the peach trees on the shore, there seemed to be a woman staring at the boat. The woman was standing beside the girl with antlers from a mysterious background. His eyes were quiet and his sleeves were down. They also clearly saw the boat on the lake. Take a look. In an instant, the scene returned to splashing Mo Peak, and Lu Chen smiled and said, but Palace Master Wu was willing to admit defeat at the time, so of course he showed weakness on purpose. His night sailing trip was just to determine if Chen Pinggan was qualified to serve as him. Allies of course will not give up their strength. The first coin appeared in the world. Is it just to make someone richer? There are 6 degrees of Buddhism and giving is the first. Good men and women in the world donate money to temples, and the temples donate money to the world. The original intention of this circulation is to make the running water not rot, and the hinges of the household not to be wormed. Speaking of which, Lu Chen twitched the bit of wine that was hanging in the air in front of him with and threw it into his mouth. Taoist, if Daofa is determined solely by fighting skills, does it make sense? Chao Rong nodded, that's right. Lu Chen smiled and said, wrong Taoist priest, the earliest practice was not for fighting, so why? Mountaineering is only for the purpose of ascending to the sky, turning the world upside down and being generous. Lu Chen picked up the piece of wine again, turned his head and smiled and said, Chao Rong, don't be so frowning all the time. The world can't be without peace for a day, and people's hearts can't be without joy for a day. Besides, your immortal realm foundation is so good. If it wasn't for the teacher to deliberately trick you with your Tao heart and aptitude, you would have already reached the peak of Ascension realm. The threshold for joining the road is over. After all, I am to blame for this. In fact, Chao Rong is a pseudonym, the founder of Lingfei Temple, the Taoist name Tianrui. Before this life, his real name was Zheng Zhe, who was born in Chidi. It was a small country that had long since been destroyed, and the title of the title has dropped again and again. Therefore, there are very few official historical records. Zheng Zhe used to be a poetry collector who traveled the world. The next moment they came to an official road. On the road, some people rode on horses and carts, some rode donkeys, and there were also people on foot carrying chaihan and charcoal sellers. When Lu Chen stopped, he stood at the door of a post station and Chao Rong watched its plaque, named Chobi Post. Lu Chen said an interesting story. Zhang Fenghai, who was imprisoned in Yushu City for 800 years, has left the Yanxia cave of Jinyue Palace. Your master's master promised him that as long as he wins the 3 religions debate, you can leave the Baiyujing Taoist status. Before I came here, he just went to Runyue Peak to persuade Wu Fu to work hard and create a sect together. Lu Bixia, a loose immortal who left the forbidden area with Zhang Fenghai, will assist them. There is also the temporarily unknown teacher Xingyuan. If Zhang Fenghai really negotiated this matter and is willing to go out after hard work, then this sect of only 4 people should not be underestimated. Chao Rong was horrified. Could it be that the Jinyue Palace was banned by Daozu himself and let Zhang Fenghai leave Yanxia Cave? Isn't this returning the tiger to the mountain? Who doesn't know the grudge between Zhang Fenghai and Zhang Jiaoyu in Yushu City? It's a recognized dead end. Zhang Fenghai is not an ordinary genius of cultivating Taoism. With this person starting a sect, spreading branches and spreading leaves, and expanding his power, even by Yujing will still be a big hidden danger. Because in Chao Rong's view, if the wild world attacking the 9 continents of Howren is an exam paper for the 2 worlds, and the question of Howren lies in the word foreign aggression, then the undercurrents of the 14 states of Qingming are surging. We'll also usher in a test paper with the word internal worry. Lu Chen smiled and said, "Don't be nervous. In the eyes of Master, my senior brother Yu is not too much in debt, and he doesn't care about another Zhang Fenghai who is blooming in the wall and fragrant outside the wall. As for the wild world, Zhou Qinggao, who was born in the Jiaoshan account, will not be surprised. He will replace a certain female cultivator who was kidnapped by Gu Ken of Beidasheng, fill the gap in the heavenly stem and become the leader. I believe that these are things that his master expected long ago, and it turns around, but this is the result. Should it be said that the fat water does not flow to outsiders, or is it unnecessary to take off your pants and fart?" Chao Rong nodded and said, "Qi practitioners are not warriors, so it's hard for anyone to have a good reputation." Lu Chen doesn't seem to agree with this statement. "Your uncle Yu, didn't you have a private seal that was stamped on your album?" Chao Rong said solemnly, "When you are the first, Wu Wu is the second." Lu Chen said with a smile, "The literature here is of course not poetry and prose, but the way of speaking, martial arts, and the ability to fight with others and kill. Therefore, the content of the seal on this side is the most authentic portrayal of senior brother Yudo's voice, and it is the first person to do that technique. My way is the highest. As for fighting skills, sorry, you can only fight for the second place." Chao Rong was fascinated by it. Only when Sherbo Yu said this, others would not feel arrogant but only feel arrogant. Lu Chen smiled and asked, "Chao Rong, how would you feel if you were to be your enemy with that uncle Yu?" Chao Rong smiled bitterly and said, "How dare you, don't even dare to think about it." Lu Chen raised his face. "If it is forced by the general situation you can't help yourself. For example, one day Shershur had a confrontation with senior brother Yu, had a fight and then was beaten to death by senior brother Yu. You should be a disciple. Oh, you must not avenge your master?" Chao Rong was stunned. Lu Chen patted Chao Rong on the shoulder and taught him a lesson. "How can you be a fool like this? With so many advantages as a teacher, what have you learned?" At this moment, Lu Chen tilted his head and quickly straightened the crown above his head. "The one who can't joke the most is senior brother Yudo. Yudo is famous for fighting with people. Until I met that damned Arya." Chao Rong obviously also thought of this notorious swordsman and asked, "Master, in the 2 battles outside the sky, how much strength did Sherbo Yu face against Liang?" Lu Chen hurriedly used the moving wine technique again, stealing a pot of wine from Changchun Palace, took a sip of wine and then asked back, "Shouldn't you first ask me if I will stay strong?" Chao Rong just thought it was unbelievable. No matter how high Liang's swordsmanship is, he should have no chance of winning against Yu Sherbua, who is known as really invincible. But in fact, in the first fight, Liang was indeed defeated by Yu Dui. The fist hit Howren from outside the sky, but in the second match, Yu Sherbua was punched by Liang, and his body fell back to the Qingming world. Lu Chen smiled and said, "This is the essence of the 14th realm fighting technique, but the secret cannot be revealed, especially when it comes to senior brother Yu and the Tao of whoever. I won't tell you any more." Chao Rong was puzzled and looked at Master. Because the senior brother once mentioned a unique hobby of the Master, it is not appropriate for the monks on the mountain to call his name directly, and they will feel it, but the Master is different. Fang, he only started chatting when he knew the other party was yelling, regardless of whether the other party was willing to talk or not. But it seems that on Liang's side, Master is reluctant to say, Liang. Afterwards they came to a Luo Shui, rested in a cold bunk on the way, fell into the water here. The river god seems to hate all people surnamed Sima. Lu Shen was on a canoe lying on his back, wandering in the sky. Let Chao Rong loudly declare his surname Sima. Sure enough, the river made waves, but a bumpy boat never capsized, and the river exhausted his means, so he had to go away angrily. Lu Chen and his disciple laughed and said, "This is called careful sailing the boat of 10,000 years." In the end, Lu Chen took Chao Rong to a small pavilion on the top of the mountain. The pavilion was humble and there was a stone tablet beside it. The inscriptions were scattered. It was vaguely recognized that there were 6 characters engraved on it. This place has the most haze. There are 100,000 red dusts in the eyes of the melted eyes, the clouds and mists are covered, the city is like a crystal curtain, and the beauty wakes up in the morning to dress up. Lu Chen wrapped his arms around his sleeves and said with a smile, "Ask the biggest doubt in your heart." Chao Rong looked up at the sky, nodded and said, "The patriarch of the 3 religions, especially the patriarch of the disciple, why didn't he stop that person?" Lu Chen smiled and said, "Chao Rong, think about it, is there really no answer for your teacher?" Chao Rong turned sideways and slapped his head, "This disciple is blunt, I implore master to clear up your doubts." Lu Chen sighed and said, "The patriarchs of the 3 sects, the 15 realms and the whole world, they are the 3 most unfree people in the world." As he spoke, Chao Rong found himself standing with his master on the boat on the lake again, but this time they were standing at the stern of the boat. Lu Chen stretched out his sleeves, pointed to the ripples in the lake and said slowly, "The patriarch of the 3 sects. It's like being in a world of colored glass, which is literally the kind. It is inconvenient to move so as not to disturb the heaven and the earth. Big trouble, just like when I came to Howren World this time, I was looking for a fish that slipped through the net, just because I, Lu Chen, was recognized as the Baiyujing Taoist of the Qingming world, and already belonged to an outsider, so I sometimes suspected of being obedient. There is God's will in the dark, and if you do it intentionally you will pass it by, and if you don't intend to insert a willow, it will create a shade." Chao Rong was silent in thought. But Lu Chen asked again, "Is the order of the places I took you to visit in the real order?" Before Chao Rong could answer, Lu Chen smiled and said, "It's like a line of words on a piece of paper. If the order is slightly out of order, you can't recognize the full meaning of a sentence." Lu Chen smiled and said, "Let me tell you a few inside stories about the 14th realm cultivator." Sword of Coming Chapter 1027. The capital of Yushuan Kingdom, in a courtyard in a rough alley in Yongjia County. The middle-aged Taoist who claimed to be catching demons at night passed by, sniffed and smiled. Before in the alley outside the courtyard, Pindao smelled a herbal scent, and then stopped. If Pindao guessed correctly, there are aconite and ginger. "Why, are you still a native?" Ningji said with a sullen face, "How dare you say that he is a Langzhong?" But on the way to escape he accidentally found a few medicine books from an abandoned pharmacy, and he learned as he walked, but he didn't dare to say that he had learned the fur. The Taoist priest said, "If you don't mind, take a look." The young man got up quickly and grinned, "What's the point of this, Dao Changwu? Wait a moment, I'll get it now." The grandfather was getting old and sleeping lightly. The teenager crept into the house, took out a homemade camphor wood box, returned to the yard and handed it to the elegant talking Taoist Wu. Chen Pingan took the wooden box and did not rush to open it. He smiled and said, "Pindao guessed the medicine book in the box, and the authors of the book are mostly from the Vulcan sect that has emerged in the last 300 years. The young man was stunned, his face full of shock, and said, "Wu Daochang is really of unpredictable prophets?" Chen Pingan shook his head and smiled and said, "The physicians in Langzhong in this vein are especially good at using jianghu. According to the herbs you have exposed, it is not difficult to guess that it is not as divine as you think, and it has nothing to do with immortality." Ningji suddenly realized that although this Taoist Wu exposed his own shortcomings, Ningji respected this Taoist priest who never made a fool of himself. If it wasn't for Lu Chendo's breakthrough, Chen Pingan would never have imagined that the emaciated young man in front of him was the one who could make the Confucian temple flourish and move the crowd everywhere to find it. Chen Pingan asked jokingly, "You still know the Vulcan sect?" Ningji nodded and said shyly, "I often sell medicinal herbs to shops. After a long time I heard some opinions from the Langzhong." Chen Pingan opened the box with a smile and picked up the books, thinking that the young man had left his hometown for all these years. With this medicine book he could not only heal himself, but also make money by collecting medicine. However, these books are thread-bound editions printed by book dealers in the market. The engraving is poor and the characters are often wrong. Medicine books are different from ordinary miscellaneous books. The proverb is written in 3 books, and the fish becomes the emperor and the tiger becomes the tiger. Chen Pingan quickly turned a few pages and said with a smile, "It means that a book, no matter how good the original is, if there are too many copies and engravings, it is easy to make mistakes, misses and backwards are inevitable. If you have the opportunity, try to find some good manuscripts, look at them and learn from the secretary to save orthography, and the school clerk to carefully proofread the text and correct mistakes so as not to be falsely passed on to future generations. Ning Ji nodded vigorously, silently remembering it in his heart, but when the young man thought about his savings, he began to worry. Qin Pingan said casually, "The aconite you picked in spring, in fact, it is the same medicinal herb. The time, month and place of the herbs are different, and each has its own name and medicinal properties. This reason cannot be ignored. In the Huangting country of the ancient Shu and the Big Lilang state, it was renamed Chuzhou not long ago, and its medicinal properties are better than other places, and it is especially good to pick and expose it in September every year, but in Chuzhou, it is also called mud. Aconite, since one side of the water and soil nurtures the other side, the herbs that pay the most attention to the nature of the soil are naturally similar." Ning Jie's eyes lit up and said, "Taoist Wu, I have only heard of Dali Longzhou before, and I will definitely visit those places in the future." The young man is full of energy and has high ambitions. He wants to read thousands of books and travel thousands of miles. Qin Pingan nodded, put the books back in the camphorwood box and returned them to the boy. He smiled and said, "Life is a long journey, and if you have a rest you can drink a scoop to quench your thirst, which is a good deed. I want to say a few more digressions to you. Since ancient times, doctors of various disciplines have always had many differences, quarreled with each other and scolded people fiercely, but scholars who scolded people are not loud, and the more refined they are, the more mean they are." Qin Pingan pressed the camphorwood box with his palm. "Actually, the difference is not in books but in people. It is not only the climate of the people who take the medicine, but also the personal learning and opinions of the people who take the medicine. Ningji, you can be considered a reader. People who have read a few medicine books, the poor man will ask you a question: who is right and who is wrong in such a quarrel?" The young man pondered for a moment but hesitated. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "If you have something to say, it's not a field test. Pindao is neither a field examiner, nor are you a candidate for the test. Pindao is not a teacher, you are not a Mengtong, and there is no test school. I mean, we are just casually chatting a few words, don't be nervous. Words and words are not only a bridge between people, but also an obstacle and a boundary." Ning Ji scratched his head and hesitated for a moment. "Wu Daochang, is there a possibility there is no difference between right and wrong, only better and more right?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "What is the answer? You will find it yourself in the future. In short, if you are a scholar, you can fight with someone to be red-faced. As a human being, you still need to be calm and calm." The young man is thoughtful. The Taoist smiled and teased, "Yo, can you understand such a big truth?" The teenager grinned, "I don't quite understand it. Anyway, I'll remember it first and think about it later." The Taoist stroked his beard and nodded and said in admiration, "Ruzi can be taught." Following the conversation with the Taoist was east and west, the young man became more peaceful before he knew it. Just like in the youth's mood, there is an extra place called Dalalangzu. It seems that there is a bookstore in the distance and there are several medicine books in it, but the price is not cheap. They are all waiting for the youth. Traveling and meeting, and on the road where the young man has not yet set off, it seems that there are a few Langzhong arguing on the side of the road, blushing and spitting, which is very interesting. There is also a warm voice on the road, seemingly repeating a sentence. In other words, being a person should be a little calmer. It's just that the impoverished young man named Ningji is unaware of these subtle scenes and thoughts. The Taoist priest said, "Meeting is fate." Pindao has traveled abroad since he was young, walking around, setting up stalls and fortune-telling, and occasionally being a traveler. Today I will teach you a few prescriptions named Xuanhuan and Yuguan. Buzhong Ichi decoction, Yinqiaosen, Sini decoction, and Zixweden. I will teach you a few of these for the time being. If there is a chance to meet again in the future, I will talk about it later." Hearing this, the young man's face flushed red, and he was so excited that he trembled in Mandarin with a little local accent. "Wu Daochang, I only know about this Sini soup. The book says that it has the power of warming the middle to dispel the cold, and returning to the sun to save the enemy." The Taoist smiled and said to himself, "These recipes more or less need to deal with money. Since you know the magic of Sini soup, then Pindao will teach you a roasting method that costs almost no money. In the future, in the place where the miasma is heavy in the mountain, before going up the mountain to collect herbs, first set up a fire at home, wait until you come back down the mountain, turn your back to the fire and bake your back. That's enough. It can connect the governor's meridian, and it can also be used to restore yang." The Taoist priest smiled and said, "Pindao is an outsider. He has always looked down on money. Yellow and white things are external things, and naturally he is not greedy for your savings. Lu Qin sat on the steps, took the white bowl from the boy's hand, smiled and said, "Whether it's medicine to practice medicine or going up the mountain to cultivate Taoism, Kung Fu is nothing more than planning on the two methods. There are thousands of methods, and in the end, it doesn't surpass the two methods of yin and yang." Ning Ji was a little embarrassed. He glanced at Dao Changwu who was beside him. Taoist Wu smiled and nodded, indicating that the young man should not be restrained. Lu Qin shook the white bowl in his hand and said with a smile, "Pin Dao Lu Qin, the Taoist name is Nanhua and he is one of the headmasters of Baiyujing. I am here tonight because I want to accept you as a direct disciple. Ning Ji, you are willing to worship Lu Qin. Are you a teacher?" Ning Ji was stunned, a little confused. What and what? Some of the words that came out of the young Taoist priest's mouth were all words that some teenagers had never heard of. Only understand one thing, the other party wants to accept himself as a disciple. Ning Ji blushed and looked at the Taoist Wu again. Only this time Wu Daochang neither nodded nor shook his head. In short, there was no hint. Lu Qin smiled, put down the white bowl first, raised his hands and clenched his fists. "Ning Ji, guess left, guess right, you can guess." Ning Ji subconsciously looked at Daochang Wu from the corner of his eyes again, and the latter nodded lightly. The teenager looked left and right and said softly, "Guess right." Lu Qin turned sideways, turned his back to Qin Pingan, and spread out his two hands at the same time, each with a seal, and the bottom part was facing Lu Qin himself. Inside the tour, outside the tour. Lu Qin clenched his hands again, raised his sleeves and released them again. The two seals slipped into the sleeves and said with a smile, "Ning Ji, look at our Taoist Wu, we are comfortable. Although we wave all day long and seem toiled, in fact, his demeanor remains unchanged. This is the so-called master of the Tao in the Book of Immortals and Quirks. His body shape is within the wandering side, and the mind of the Tao is outside the wandering side." Qin Pingan smiled. 3,000 years ago, Lu Qin, who traveled far away to the Qingming world, said in a book a long time ago, "What is a great master? Someone who is not a traveler." Not only is it a very mellow Taoist language, it is possible, just possible, and it also contains a layer of meaning. Pure martial arts become gods, and it is a great master. Qin Pingan suddenly found that a long river of time seemed to be stagnant. The young man Ning Ji had stood still. Naturally, it was Headmaster Lu's method. Lu Qin stretched out his hand and brought 2 jugs of wine again. One is woody wine from Shujin Lake Chishui City, and one is Chuanshou wine from Gingyun Peak in Yunxia Mountain. Yu and Zhong Kuei first met in Hure town on the border of Dequan, but Zhong Kuei first revealed his supernatural powers outside of Confucianism. It seems that it was in that buried river, right? You didn't have any idea about the rain charm back then, largely because you didn't refine the 5-element natal object, and then you bought one from Lu Yong, a Taoist priest of Qinghu Palace, at the price of 1 cabbage. Tasteless, but to you the 5-colored golden kitchen stove which is priceless to you, hee 5-colored, isn't this even more coincidental and unfinished, right? Speaking of this, Lu Qin seemed to be a little dry, so he hurriedly raised his head to drink gudong and took a big mouthful of wine. Qin Pingan finally opened his mouth and asked with a smile, "What does Headmaster Lu mean? Do you want to say that these things are waiting for people, or people are doing things?" Lu Qin said, It's easy to ask. If it was Chao Rong, he wouldn't be able to ask such a question if he was beaten to death. Previously he was at Pomo Peak and his disciples were blunt, so I had to look at him to comfort him. Where, in fact, it is." Qin Pingan looked straight ahead and moved the jug slightly towards Lu Qin. Lu Qin tapped the jug in his hand and drank each other. After drinking, Lu Qin wiped the corners of his mouth with the back of his hand, thought for a moment and said, "I really have to worry about who it is. It's not worth making a fuss at all. You me Chao Rong Shui from that haunted house in Changning County. Rui the schoolboy next door to her, Yongjia County here, Ningji here." Having said that, Lu Qin put away his magical powers, the 3 vertical scrolls in the courtyard dissipated, and the long river of time continued to flow. Lu Qin squeezed the water bowl with his fingers, but instead of drinking the water himself, he unexpectedly handed it to Qin Pingan and asked with a smile, "Why don't you come to accept the apprentice?" Qin Pingan didn't expect Lu Qin to do such a thing and was speechless. The boy's eyes lit up when he heard the words. A pair of eyes, shining brightly in the night, like lighting a candle, is the longing and hope of a young man whose heart is full of disappointment. Lu Qin Thief smiled. Qin Pingan glanced at Lu Qin and said with a smile, "Master Lu is so happy?" Lu Qin immediately restrained his smile and put the white bowl back on the steps between the two. My disciple said something from the bottom of his heart, saying that Shanju Qin and Shansa's husband, student and teacher, both of you are good at being good teachers. He Chao Rong expressed his admiration from the bottom of his heart that Pindao has a good apprentice who speaks bluntly. Among his own disciples and students, from Cui Dongshan, who was the first to become a student, to Zhao Shuxia, a closed-door disciple who was regarded by Qin Pingan as his own boxing method. Of course, Qin Pingan was very satisfied with everyone, but at the same time he did not hide his partiality towards them. Having said that, in a sense, Qin Pingan seems to have not received a disciple who is most like himself for the time being. After all, the threshold is not low. If you are a sword cultivator, you can learn boxing and you have to be a talisman trainer. Otherwise, Qin Pingan, who has learned a lot of complicated things and can be regarded as a doorman, can teach everything about preaching, especially in the word personal transmission. He can really get what he wants, incisively and vividly. The students and disciples are all so good that Qin Pingan, a gentleman and a master, seems to be more like a hands-off shopkeeper than a mountain leader. Therefore, Qin Pingan has a lot of regrets about teaching his disciples in person. Cui Dongshan doesn't need to teach them, and Chao Qingqing's mentors are actually Chong Qiu and Lu Tai. Besides, for example, teaching Pei Qian boxing? To teach Guizhuzhou swordsmanship, who was already a Jindan swordsman when we met again. Even with Zhao Shuxia, who is by his side now, he started learning boxing and more often he taught himself. After finally meeting a little girl, Qin Pingan wanted to show off occasionally, but what happened to Chai Wu's side? Qin Pingan put away his thoughts, turned his head, looked at Lu Qin and asked Lu Qin with his heart. When we were young, did we survive a certain winter? Did we freeze to death in the night? Us. What do you mean? Lu Qin was dumbfounded, silent for a long time, exhaled a long breath and said solemnly, Qin Pingan, don't follow that Jing Juzhong, really listen to my advice. Jing Juzhong is Jing Juzhong, the only one. He will think about proving that he is not a Taoist ancestor. What kind of energy do you Qin Pingan get involved in this kind of excitement? Seeing that Qin Pingan didn't speak, Lu Qin raised a hand, put his fingers together and said sadly, am I so out of touch among friends? Do you still need to make a poisonous oath? Qin Pingan smiled. A pair of golden eyes appeared, but the vision was fleeting. Qin Pingan breathed a sigh of relief and nodded. He could rule out the most unlikely possibility. Before that, Qin Pingan was afraid that he was the key dream of one of Lu Chen's 5 dreams and 7 hearts, Meng Dai. I've been friends for many years, don't mess with my heart. Lu Qin wiped his sweat-free forehead and said cautiously, actually. Qin Pingan twitched the corners of his mouth and said, actually, have you ever had a similar idea? Lu Qin blinked. Qin Pingan asked, since you have thought of it, why not do it? Lu Qin smiled brightly and said, you're not curious, why did my master walk with you all the way in the town, and finally stop at the entrance of the mud bottle alley? Qin Pingan frowned slightly and asked back, who used to live next door to my ancestral house in Mupin Lane? Lu Qin laughed but just tapped his heart lightly with his hand and said dong dong dong. The school has only just opened for a few days, so it's not an exaggeration to say that it's a disadvantage to be a teacher. I heard that the long-tongued woman who likes to chew her tongue has been pouring dirty water on the school and the master recently, chasing the wind, and dare to say anything ugly. Although Qin Pingan here has deliberately put away all realms, supernatural powers and weather, it is no different from ordinary people, so Qin Pingan did not hear the few times Zhao Shuxia said hello before, and the girl in the Wind Snow Temple did not hear it. Xiao Yuhui Pavilion, she accidentally came here to control the wind, mistakenly thought that Qin Pingan was pretending to be sleeping on the rattan chair, and deliberately ignored her, which was really the fault of xuanhuan. But even so, even if Qin Pingan just stared at him at the time, he would probably be able to frighten the country woman who came to mess with her. Interesting is interesting, funny is funny, Zhao Shuxia still sighed, what a blessing to be able to follow Master to study and work. I heard that many Confucian academies now want Master to give lectures, but Master declined. Qin Pingan shook the fan and laughed to himself. I remember that the first time I met Wei Xian was in a place called Hue Town on the border of Dequan. In the inn we, the founding emperor of Nanyuan Kingdom, have a discerning eye. Unique, I just met, I remember Wei Haoyang's second sentence, that is, the master is so tyrannical in the middle of the winter, what do you think? Wei Xian is not only good at drinking, but also looking at people. His eyesight is even better. Lu Baixiang and Sui Right are far inferior to Wei Xian. After all, Zhao Shuxia wasn't senior sister Pei Qian, nor younger senior brother Cui Dongshan, so he couldn't handle such words. For a while it was a little cold, and then Qin Pingan said 2 words with little pause for no reason. Knowing that it can't be helped, it's like a life. The moonlight wind has finally fallen. Zhao Xuxia was not sure, but he noticed that tonight's master seemed to be a little relieved, especially relaxed. Chen Pingan laughed softly. You should send that letter to Luapa Mountain. Remember to choose a secluded landscape, walk along the way and experience the unusual physique of Wujing Wufu on the way. When you arrive at Luapa Mountain, don't rush back. Let me, the old cook helps to feed the fist, and the location is on the second floor of the bamboo building. Let's talk about the injury. If you feel good about asking the fist, you can get a few more beatings. It's best to learn a few more stakes with Zhu Lian. Guys like to keep secrets. I guess there are a lot of unique skills in the box, but I haven't had the chance to show them. You are also a swordsman, and Zhu Lian is also a swordsman. When you get to the second floor, you can have the cheek to let him shake a few hands. If you can play in the bamboo building, by the way, it is also possible to play in the 6 realms. You don't need to worry about my food, clothing, housing and transportation. If you are worried about this kind of thing, it is better to worry that your boss is not too young or you are a bachelor. Zhao Xuxia was on the school's side, and had just entered the 5th realm from the 4th realm of martial arts, because it was all within the scope of the body-refining realm. Just now, Taoist Wu Di, a Taoist priest, asked Lu Qin about the textual research in the courtyard in Yongjia County, and how Zhu Lian's swordsmanship was compared to that on the right side of Sui. Lu Qin smiled and replied with only 2 words, not low. As for whether it was only higher or lower than Sui's right side, or in the eyes of his headmaster Lu, Zhu Lian's swordsmanship attainment was worthy of the word, not lower. At that time, Lu Qin was reluctant to elaborate. You must know that Lu Qin once wrote about the sword. In addition, in Baiyujing Yushu City, he borrowed a piece of land with the city owners Guijie and Shao Xiang to build a private study, which was named Guanqianjianzhai. The 2 main and deputy city lords are both Daomen de Jiangxian among the Baiyujing Daoist officials. And Zhu Lian once said that he leaked his mouth, saying that his first time walking around the world was to travel far with a sword. If Zhu Lian was not proficient in swordsmanship, Chen Pingan would not believe it. There are 4 people in the painting scroll of Lotus Flower Blessed Land. Today Zhu Lian seems to be the only one who has not accepted direct disciples. You must know that Zhu Lian is already a martial artist of the limit. Wei Xian and Lu Baixiang, who have contributed more together, are now in the far-flung realm, and the same is true of their fellow villagers. Only Zhu Lian, who has been in Luapa Mountain for so many years, is more interested in replacing the young mountain owner as a steward. On top of the general affairs, he was busy with everything every day, but he only had time to learn martial arts. Qin Pingan didn't know what he was thinking. That's why the 2 sides met in the capital of Nanyuan Kingdom. Don't spare any effort, just ask the boxing heartily and compete with each other. According to the years of learning martial arts, you are 1 year older than me, Qin Pingan, and I am 1 level higher than you, Zhu Lian, in martial arts. Zhao Xuxia nodded and agreed. Indeed, in the 30 years after Master left his hometown for the first time, almost most of his time was spent traveling far and abroad, and it was not his turn to take care of Master's daily life. I remember Zhu Lian once said that when we cannot be responsible for ourselves, it is difficult to be qualified to be responsible for others. As for the temporary letter delivery, it turned out that Qin Pingan had just written a letter during the day. He originally planned to let Chen Lingjun take it to Luopao Mountain and send it to Qingping Jianzong when he came to wander here next time. The recipient was Chao Qingqing. In the letter, Qin Pingan suggested that the proud student, who was very pleased with his eyes, should take time to go to Tianmu Academy and listen to the lecture given by the deputy head of the mountain, Wen Yu. These things, as well as some selfishness, Qin Pingan has always kept the secret from Zhao Xuxia. Zhao Xuxia asked curiously, Master, it seems that you respect Wen Shan from Tianmu Academy very much? Qin Pingan thought for a moment, carefully selected his words and said slowly, how can I put it, Wen Yu is very close to my mind. The image of a scholar in an ideal state. Not only is he strong, but there is a kind of scholar who naturally abandons me. Spiritual, unparalleled in spirit, at the same time very pragmatic, ambitious, meticulous, stable, and always have a strong compassion for the weak. So in my opinion, when you can be worthy of pure Confucianism praise. Qin Pingan smiled and said, as my husband said, being aspiring and being a gentleman is also a gentleman. Wen Yu is this kind of upright gentleman. Maybe he was infected by the mood brought by the change in Master's mood. Zhao Xuxia rarely joked. How about the comparison between Mr. Wen Shanchang and Mr. Lu of the Taihui sword sect? Qin Pingan lost his laugh, gently fanning the fan with a relaxed attitude, squinting his eyes and smiling. It's not quite the same. I'm more comfortable with Lu Jiuxian and am more restrained with Wen Shanchang. Zhao Xuxia was a little shocked. Master has never seen a lot of wind and waves, and he feels restrained when he gets along with others? Although Zhao Xuxia does not belong to any mountain in Luopa Mountain, but the atmosphere of Luopa Mountain is there, everyone is more rude and a lot of news is exchanged, just like no one is a marginal person. So he knew very well that every time Master went out for a long trip and returned to Luobao Mountain, it seemed as if he had brought a big bag of stories. After returning to his hometown, no matter what magnificent things he encountered, he seldom followed it personally or by watching. Who repeatedly refers to someone. It is only said that the Master is here to teach, and under his Zhao Xuxia when you has been mentioned many times. The first time Chen Pingan was warm was on his own Fengyuan ferry. Although it was the first time they met, the two sides didn't talk much, but Chen Pingan was on Zhao Shuxia's side and made no secret of his admiration for this academy gentleman. For example, when you had an idea that he was going to use a certain mountain sect as an example. The first condition was that the number of people in the Zhu Shirtang must be an odd number. Before that, there will be a smaller internal discussion to judge whether some important resolutions need to be put on the agenda. The 8 booklets vary in thickness and content. There are not only geographical records like landscape travel notes, but also excerpts from Buddhist precepts and Taoist classics, as well as personnel and knowledge of Yushan, which is based on Zhuji and so on. If the talisman paper avatars attached to the minds of 7 revealing, 2 concealing and 9 grains are regarded as co-editing a book, then Chen Pingan, who stays in Luopa Mountain and does not move, is somewhat similar to the chief inspector or chief editor. This Chen Pingan walked out of the house, hung a sword talisman, and Yufeng went to Huaihuang County. According to the resolution of the Confucian Temple in the last meeting, the ministers of the rights of various countries in the future must all be from the children of the 72 Academy. In Wen Ye's view, scholars who become officials must not only have a solid knowledge of personal self-cultivation, but also be proficient in law. Law and arithmetic, there is a pragmatic technique of economic benefit to the people, not only must be able to be sincere, continuously enrich knowledge, but also be good at solving, or at least understand the operating principles of specific money, litigation and other matters. At that time, when Yu and Chen Pingan gave an example. In the courtroom, the Ministry of Rights and the officials of the Ministry of Household quarreled. One could not only talk about etiquette and morality, and the other would talk about their own money bags. This was a chicken and duck talk. Since the students who enter the academy are the well-deserved seeds of reading in all countries, the academy has to shoulder the responsibility of cultivating the seeds. The academy should focus on researching more than a dozen issues, open up a wide range of opinions, and allow Confucian scholars to participate in policy theory. As far as I know, instead of reading only my own books, I bury myself in the academy and do my own knowledge. The family law of a country's ancestors, and even the Confucian temple rituals, whether it is unchangeable or can be revised, whether there is a possibility of perfection, and how to improve it, I have been able to understand it clearly during my studies in the academy. Make sure that everyone knows, even if they still have their own answers, then seek common ground while reserving differences for the time being, and leave it to the students after they leave the academy, in the family, in the court, and the specific personnel they will encounter in the future, to corroborate or overturn their earliest views. To talk about any truth, there must be a series of rigorous and meticulous inference processes, and any point of view must be supported by sufficient reason. When you said that scholars in the world are rational like writing a book, the argument is only the title and the preface. The argument is the bibliography and the main text chapters. Step by step, every link can stand up to scrutiny. Ambition is emotional, romantic, and can be lofty and boundless. Doing the things at hand is rational, it must be done in order, and the context must be clear. In addition, when you also said that he intends to take the lead in the academy and cooperate with the imperial courts of various countries to compile a general medicine book in an official capacity, and to enhance the status of hundreds of Chinese medicine practitioners. He will also compile the famous reforms in Howren's history, regardless of success or failure, the evaluations and different opinions of the time and later generations, into a book for the reference of future scholars. This coincides with many of Chen Ping's views. And obviously Wen Yu is more far-reaching and careful than Chen Pingan. Probably this is the so-called instant confidant. In addition to being a Confucian upright gentleman who served as the deputy mountain chief, Wen Yu was actually a real sword cultivator. Just like the genealogy monks in the Qingming world, of course they are all Taoist priests. But it doesn't prevent them from having their own cultivation paths and having other additional identities. For example, xuanhuan is the line of Daomen sword immortals, and Huayang Palace of Defei Mountain has a side branch of sword cultivators. Wen Yu joked with his friend Wang Zai, who was a guest in his study before, saying that if he went to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, he would definitely be able to enter the Summer Palace. This is not Wen Yu's words that deliberately belittle his friends and elevate him. This Chen Pingan quietly came to the main street of the town. The shopkeeper behind the scenes was Aunt Feng's restaurant. At this time the lights were still brilliant and the voices were noisy. All the way to Mud Bottle Alley, Chen Pingan stopped for a moment at the entrance of the alley, then walked slowly in the alley, and walked to the door next to the ancestral house, facing the house that seemed to have been abandoned since he can remember, and turned to the left side of the alley. Looking somewhere, Chen Pingan squatted down, his arms wrapped around his sleeves as if there was a young child rolling on the ground, and then glanced to the right, the earth outside his ancestral house, but there was a rouge buried under it. Box. Just like the question asked by Taoist Wu Di and Lu Qin, there are so many things in the world, is it man-made or God-given? If everything is determined by God, it is an unchangeable destiny. But if not, then there are inevitably many coincidences on the road of life, and the gains and losses are up to you. Listening to Lu Chen's tone, it seems that most of them are the latter. Chen Pingan hesitated for a while and followed Lu Chen's previous way of climbing over the wall, with the courtyard door behind him. After walking a few steps, he wanted to push open the door in front of him and go inside to see if there were any cables, but he just stretched out his hand. Then stopped, thinking about whether to give up, turned over again and entered his house with one hand against the wall, took out the key to open the door, sat at the table, took out a fire certificate from his sleeve and lit an oil lamp. This, Chen Pingan, is actually the scholar he once had in his mind. He studied and studied when he was young. After leaving the school after a lot of hard work, the elderly had their own study. It is probably the kind of life that parents hope for Chen Pingan: peace, food and clothing, and a family and a business. Some simple truths: parents actually do not need to repeatedly nagging with a child. Be kind to others, be polite, and when you meet your elders on the road, you can't be a little mute, you have to call people. Be an honest person and do things according to your duty. Because of how parents and elders do, children will always see the truth when they are next to them. Maybe this is the real homeschooling. At the village school, Zhao Shusha asked, "Master, why do you want to be an ordinary person?" Chen Pingan smiled and said, "Opening a library and teaching at the foot of the mountain is to teach and educate people, and what to do with the magical powers on the mountain." Zhao Shusha was speechless. Chen Pingan sat up and murmured, "Teaching and educating people cannot be separated. If one day the school is just teaching, the parents and elders who send their children to the school as well as the masters think so, and there will be problems." Chen Pingan was silent for a moment, then smiled and said, "I also have selfish intentions and want to learn from Mr. Qi." Hearing the master's statement, Zhao Shusha immediately understood the words in his heart. It seems that the master has always called the younger brother of Wensheng's lineage Mr. Qi, not senior brother Qi. It was before, it is now, and it may be so in the future. Chen Pingan suddenly smiled and said, "Under the tree you may have a junior apprentice soon, 14 years old, surnamed Ningji. It is only possible for the time being and cannot be said to be the case because before that, Ningji had another apprentice to choose. Master's process, Lu Qin or me, wait for him to calm down, think for a few more days and then make a decision." Zhao Shusha mistakenly thought that he had misheard. "Who?" Chen Pingan said, "You heard right, it's Lu Qin." Previously in Yongjia County, Chen Pingan explained the importance of Lu Qin and Bai Yujing's arguments to the young man in detail, using metaphors that many young people could understand. Of course Ningji was startled, but Lu Qin and Chen Pingan both noticed one thing: the young man did not have the slightest joy, instead his face was pale, and he fell into a huge instinctual fear. When a person has a deep-seated distrust of the world, it must come from all kinds of hardships on the road of life. The young boy who has gone through a lot of love and affection parted ways and died, so his state of mind is gray and there is almost no color at all. Lu Qin wanted to follow the gourd and draw a scoop, learn from Chen Pingan and explain in detail to Ningji. Chen Pingan Yingguan Luopao Mountain Master, the future national teacher of the Dali dynasty, a close disciple of Wensheng's lineage, and the future teacher Ningyao and others said. It's just that Chen Pingan couldn't help Lu Qin to do so, and gestured to Zhang with his eyes to teach him not to cheat. Originally, Lu Qin asked the young man to bring a bowl of white water and replace the tea with water. According to Lu Qin's intention, as long as Ningji nodded and agreed at that time, he would drink water again. Even if Lu Qin drank the apprentice tea, he and Ningji had the apprenticeship status. This glorious trip, the merits and virtues are complete, of course Lu Qin can return to the Qingming world and Baiyujing. The reason why Lu Qin was suddenly enlightened was that the old trick was repeated. If he wanted Ningji to switch to Qin Pinggan's sect, of course, Master Lu had his own plans. First, choosing Ningji as the direct disciple involved too much cause and effect. It wasn't that Lu Qin couldn't handle it, but he was always lazy. Like his disciples Chao Rong, He Xiaoyang, and Lu Qin, they were all very casual when it came to preaching in person. After they were accepted as disciples, they threw away a few spiritual books, taught them a few sects, and then let them go. What's more, Ningji's background determines that the young man is different from all the direct disciples before Lu Qin. Lu Qin must be brought by his side until the young man is in the top 5 realms. It can come to an end. Completely restless. Furthermore, the benefits of accepting young people as disciples are actually not as big as imagined. Lu Qin has already made some rough deductions outside the alley. There is no Taoist friend on the road, and it is indeed very likely that he will become a very young monk of the 14th realm. Then when he has a teacher, even if Lu Qin preaches personally, Ningji's Dao achievement has begun to decline. Will there be 14 realms in the future? It's about to make a question mark. Therefore, Lu Qin neither wanted to make mistakes and recruit a mess that must be done by himself, nor did he want to make mistakes and delay Ningji's practice. In fact, Lu Qin had 3 candidates in mind who were fully qualified to be Ningji's preaching mentor: senior brother Ko Ming, Li Sheng, and Bai Diqing Zheng Juzhong. But the senior brothers have not yet joined the Tao, and the ritual and sage can be said to be a matter of time, and Zheng Juzhong, after all, is a giant of the devil's way. Even if he dares to send it over, the Confucian temple will not agree. Qin Pinggan was ranked 4th. As a result, the boy was bored for a long time before he opened his mouth and asked Lu Qin a question. Since Taoist Lu has such a distinguished status, why did he accept himself as a disciple? Lu Qin was choked for a moment, and he was so wronged. Could it be to tell the truth openly and honestly with the young man, saying that your child was born from an unhealthy background, has a turbulent fate, was born to collect debts, and is destined to be a troublemaker who has caused the Confucian temple to have headaches for many, many years? Someone has to watch over you? And this person must have a high enough realm, a good enough patience, and a preaching skill and method that is mellow and etiquette, so that he can lead your crooked neck tree into the right path little by little and practice the right path? Otherwise, your kid, as expected, will be a surefire, extremely young cultivator of the 14th realm, who will bring a huge unknown to the vast world and the wild world. Lu Qin looked resentful, raised his chin, and nodded towards Qin Pinggan. Ningji, don't you have anything to ask Dao Changwu? The young man asked Qin Pinggan, Taoist Wu, are you willing to accept me as your apprentice? Lu Qin almost spat out a mouthful of old blood on the spot. It's like a person who first asks others how the weather will be today next year, and then asks another person if the sky is clear and the weather is good today. Can the 2 questions have the same difficulty? Can this be considered a bowl of water? Lu Qin was so angry that he recognized this disciple directly. In the dark of night, on a rural road, a young Taoist priest led a thin boy towards the school where Qin Pinggan lived. I made an appointment with Qin Pinggan earlier and asked Ningji to think about it for a few days. Lu Qin felt that it would be better to bring the young man to see the real Taoist Wu Di, so he took Ningji and used the shrinking method. In the blink of an eye, just as Ningji stepped into the alley from the yard, he found himself walking on a completely unfamiliar yellow mud road and asked, Master Lu, isn't Taoist Master Wu a Taoist priest? How can he be a teacher? Lu Qin smiled and said, being a good teacher is a stinky problem that cannot be corrected. I always want to be a good person and make the whole world better, even if it is a little bit better. Ningji asked, is the Luzhang Church thinking about making the world better? Lu Qinxiao was embarrassed. I'm a lazy person and I don't particularly care about the ups and downs of the road I used to be on the road and heard a long time ago I wrote a book. You should die in the water. Everything I want to say to the world is in the book. Is it because the old gods like Lu Zhangjiao have seen too many things they don't think about it? To save that person, I will only watch the life and death of ordinary people like us, and feel that it is all self-inflicted or simply don't bother to watch. Lu Qin smiled and said nothing. As expected of Ningji, he seems to be a boring gourd. As long as he asks, the question is always so tricky and big. Lu Qin noticed that the boy was in a dull mood and asked, how about you before meeting Wu Daochang and me, did you think about how to live? Ningji whispered, live well, take revenge for revenge and repay your kindness. Lu Qin asked, you and Daochang Wu have only met for the 2nd time, so why are you so close to him? Aren't you afraid that you will meet a bad guy with ulterior motives? It was also the first time for the young man to think about this question. After thinking for a moment, he answered honestly, The boy hesitated for a while and then asked in a low voice, Wu Daochang, just like Headmaster Lu, did you come looking for me from the beginning? Ningji is not a fool. Since he can let a headmaster by Yujing visit the alley in person, there must be an unknown reason. Lu Qin shook his head and said, It's not like me, he met you, it was just a very accidental encounter. Daochang Wu has similar tempers as you, and the reason why he appeared in the capital of Xuanhuan is just like you said just now. That sentence belongs to repaying kindness and revenge for revenge. The boy's mood instantly improved. Sure enough, I guessed it again. That Wu Daoist is different from Headmaster Lu. Lu Qin was so angry. Taoist Wu Di is just the avatar of Qin Pingan. As a result, on the side of the youth, it seems that a fart is fragrant. People are more popular than people. The poor Taoist reports his identity as soon as they meet. How can he not treat people with sincerity? It is said that there is true love in the world. So Lu Qin smiled and asked, Then if Wu Daochang had the same original intention as mine, will you be disappointed when you find out the truth? Ningji thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, I won't be disappointed. Perhaps, instead, it will feel like a kind of luck that must be cherished. It's like a poor worm, afraid of poverty. One day he was so hungry that his eyes dazzled, and suddenly he picked up a piece of silver on the ground. Lu Qin rolled his eyes and brought a pot of wine from the Qingmei Temple in Nantang Lake. Lu Qin took a sip of the green plum wine, but his teeth were sore. The teenager was surprised. Lu Qin asked, Is it easy to learn this immortal technique, whether you want to learn it or not, and you can drink without spending money in the future? The young man shook his head, but he still swallowed the words to his stomach. Even if you are Lu Qin, who is said by Daochang Wu as a person who cannot be bypassed by scholars in the world, and is the head teacher of Bai Yujing, it's not good to jump over the wall casually, and it's even worse if you don't give money for stealing things. Lu Qin smiled and asked, Ningji, haven't you stolen anything while fleeing this way? Ningji answered honestly, I've stolen it more than once or twice, but it's really impossible to live. Lu Qin sighed, No wonder you and Wu Daochang have a good relationship. Ningji wondered, Wu Daochang also came from a bitter background. Has he stolen something? Lu Qin answered the question, Many times when you make a mistake but know it, there are two possibilities. One is to get used to it and don't bother to deceive others, just learn to use excuses to pave the way for happiness. Build a dam so that there will be no floods and extremes. That's why the most holy master said, Don't be afraid to change it. Ningji said, That's why you stole it too? Then the teenager added, Wu Daochang must have been very hard when he was a child. Lu Qin had no choice but to raise his head and raise his hand again, taking a sip of green plum wine. Glancing at the young man beside him, Lu Qin has occasionally regretted over the years, regretting that he didn't throw Qin Pingan directly into a sap and sack and throw it to Bai Yujing, whether it was thrown in Nanhua City, or as a senior apprentice, taking apprentices on behalf of his teachers. Maybe not so much trouble now. Noticing the strange look in the headmaster Lu's eyes, Ningji slowed down intentionally or unintentionally, but soon returned to normal. This is a mysterious intuition. The heart of harming others is indispensable, and the heart of defending others is indispensable. Moreover, the young man was indeed using his own method to carefully observe a Bai Yujing headmaster. Lu Qin nodded secretly. The so-called cultivator is a genius, but that's it. Lu Qin asked, Did you go to school when you were young? Ningji said with a sad expression, I only learned a few dozen words after I attended the school for a few days. Lu Qin asked again, Since there is a school, it means that the family is in a good situation. On the first day of school, have you ever worshipped the hanging statue of the most holy teacher and kowtowed to the master of the school? Ningji shook his head and said, I was very young at that time and my uncle was temporarily serving as a teacher. It was not considered a formal admission, so I didn't pay attention to it. The secular clan school at the foot of the mountain is generally set up in the clan ancestral hall, and children with foreign surnames are not accepted. Private schools like Qin Pingan's are not limited by surnames. They mainly teach children to read and write. Most of them are long-term schools. Lu Qin leaned against the window with a weary attitude. He smiled and said, By the way, Daochang Wu's real name is Qin Pingan, Dong Qin Ping 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 Ping. Ningji nodded. This market boy has never had the chance to know that this very common name is not common. Inside the school, the man in the blue shirt said, My name is Qinji Dong Qin, the footprints of the footsteps. From today onwards I will be your teacher. The first sentence I want to teach you, there are 5 words, it is learn and learn with time. The teacher paused for a long time at the word learning, and said slowly, The word learning, will be interpreted as a reading for the time being. Lu Chen was lying on the windowsill drinking wine. I don't know when there was a Celadon wine glass in his hand. He put the wine jug aside, held the wine glass and drank his own wine. Tali Chunfeng had a glass of wine. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.